Have you liked and shared Unfound's Facebook page yet? Unfound has now covered 328 disappearances over the course of over 400 episodes. It has an interview-based format and concentrates on the facts, not the theories. Today, and for the 17th time, I will take you back to the beginning, then right up to the present, as I cover news over the past 4 months pertaining to many of Unfound's cases. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. But first, Unfound news. If you're in the Tampa area, you might run into me if you attend the presentation Psychology of Serial Killers at the Capitol Theater in Clearwater next Friday, April 26th. Of course, just look for the hair. Next, we're getting near the end of the month, so be looking for the next Unfound Now episode on YouTube, where I analyze a very recent disappearance. Finally, there's a poll going on in the discussion group on Facebook right at this second. Please go there and take part now. The question: what percentage of Unfound episodes have you listened to? Man, I hate ending sentences with prepositions. Okay, let's get started. And if you're wondering, well, isn't the update episode usually not until the end of April? That's true, but all I can say is we just had a change in the scheduling, and that's really all I can say right now, because talking about it will just tick me off. So, if you're new to Unfound, or maybe you forget, this is how I do these updates. I go through all of the disappearances, and I, of course, as you know, I try to keep up with as many as I can, even though there's like 320 some of them now, but I do the best that I can, and I'm not going to say I haven't missed an update or two over the past 5 years or how long I've been doing these update episodes, but I go through all of them and I check to see if there's any new news. This just not mean. Certainly a lot of these get news coverage, but what we're looking for is new information, is really what I'm looking for when I'm going back through. And so I go back through all of the disappearances and the Unfound Nows, the series on YouTube, the monthly series on YouTube, and I see if there's any new information for any of those disappearances. Any new information that has occurred in the past 4 months. So going back to the beginning of 2024 up to the present. So no new information that came out in 2023 or 2022 or any other time is going to be included. Only new information for disappearances covered by Unfound, and that new information has occurred in the past roughly 4 months. And all I do is jot down a little notes. There is necessarily no script. I'm not reading anything, although there's a couple news stories that I'll be reading, but really for the most part, just like when I did the Q&A episode, just have a few notes or maybe nothing, maybe just a word, and that's enough for me to cue me to, oh yeah, this is the update for that particular disappearance. So please excuse any no's and pregnant pauses and ers and ums and maybe a little bad English here and there, because I'm doing 99.9% of this off the top of my head. All I have are a few notes for each disappearance in front of me. So let's get started. And oh, by the way, one more thing. I go from the oldest episodes to the newest episodes for both the podcast and Unfound Now. So I go chronologically. First update. MH370 was a Malaysian Airlines flight originating in Kuala Lumpur. The destination was Beijing, China. On the night of March 8th, 2014, while flying over the South China Sea, all of its communication equipment was shut off, making it invisible to air traffic control. An hour later, Malaysian military radar tracked the flight heading northwest up the Malacca Strait. Flight 370 was never seen again. Now, the update here is that I appeared on Jeff Wise's podcast, Deep Dive, back in, we filmed it March, and it came out, I think, in March. So it's been just very recently here that I did that, and that was actually when I was up seeing my dad during the month of March of 2024. So he and I had been talking about this for a while. He started this podcast going very deep into the minutia of the disappearance of Flight 370, and he told me he was going to be starting that podcast. And way back when, he had said, well, you got to come on and at some time, because I've written things to him, insights to him, since he appeared back in 2017 on Unfound, and even published one of my messages. It was more like a whole blog post on his blog, if you want to go find it at jeffwise.net. He just doesn't talk about Flight 370 there. He covers a whole range of topics there. But he's gotten to be a good friend of mine, although we've never met in person. It's really weird. I was just watching some plane crash shows over the last couple days on Paramount Plus, and there he was from like 12 years ago or something like that. And so he was well known well before he became a prominent speaker and an analyst and writer-author for Flight 370. So I appeared on his podcast back in March. I hope you checked it out. If not, go do that after you're done listening to this update episode. I have to admit that if it were my show and if I were being interviewed about Flight 370, that I probably would have taken it in a different direction. But it's his show. He wanted to talk about some particular items, and I was more than happy to do that. Certainly, if I were to go on there again, I wish, maybe we would have a deeper talk about Flight 370 and how it can be compared to just more of your, I guess what we may call, quote unquote, the run-of-the-mill disappearances, because amazingly, there are a lot of similarities, and I've kind of passed this along to him through email over the many months, if not years now. That just wasn't what he wanted to talk about. We talked when I appeared, when he interviewed me, I don't know, was it a month ago now, something like that. He wanted to talk about my magic background and how magicians make things disappear, even though I'm not a magician myself. But for 4 years, I was stage manager for a magic show. And I must have done, 1,000 shows or something as a stage manager, something like that, some crazy number. And got to work with them, saw how they put some of their tricks together, and got to see behind the scenes. I do not reveal necessarily any tricks. I'm not a magician, never aspired to be one. That was just a job I had, although it was very cool. Don't think I gave any tricks away while I was on Jeff's show. But it's all about misdirection. And, of course, that's kind of what Jeff believes regarding Flight 370. That if the plane was hijacked, it wasn't done by the pilot, it was by a passenger or passengers. There was a mixed direction, making it look like it went to the southern Indian Ocean when really it went somewhere else, Russia, Kazakhstan, wherever. And so it's a form of magic. What a magician does is look at my left hand where really the trick's happening in my right hand. So we talked a little bit about that. And so I hope if you've not listened to it yet, please go and find that episode within the last month. It's called Deep Dive. It's about Flight 370. There are 30-some episodes now. I don't know how many more they're going to be honest with you. But you want to check that out. If you've not listened to it yet, you got, of course, a lot of listening to do, but it's well worth it. It does get a little technical, as it did when I interviewed him. That was certainly the most technical interview I ever did regarding a disappearance when Jeff was on way back in 2017. And Flight 370 is still missing, and Jeff continues to be right, and that he said way back when that the jet would not be found on the floor of the Indian Ocean. He continues to be correct about that. And despite those parts being found on the coast of Africa, I think there's reasons to question whether they're legitimate or not, if there's some sort of scam or scheme going on. So that's the update. I appeared on that podcast. Please check it out, and please follow that podcast and give it a nice review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Next update, Lucinda Hues. This was the most recent revisitation episode. Lucinda Hues was a 17-year-old from Tampa, Florida. She had gotten married at 15 and already had 2 children. On October 27th, 1984, Lucinda went out to a club with a couple of new friends. After midnight, the two wanted to leave, but Lucinda decided to stay. She was never seen again. And I had picked that one out. I had actually had a couple that were kind of bouncing around up in my head as the next, as far as revisitation episodes. What do we do? About three or four of those a year. Want to make sure we never forget about the old episodes of Unfound disappearances that were featured very early on in Unfound's existence, where it did not have as many listeners as it does now. And I realize some people, when they find out about Unfound, start going back from the beginning or something. But I think a lot of people just kind of maybe pick up wherever they're starting here, and maybe in 2024, and then they figure, well, when I have time, I'll go back and listen to some of the older episodes. So I try to spur that along by including an old episode once in a while, but I always include new commentary. So that was a revisitation episode that came out in, what was it? I think in early March. Sometime I think that came out while I was up at my dad's in Pennsylvania. And so that's the update. But what I want to add to that was that I think my opinion on that disappearance has changed at least a little bit. I think, of course, I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot about disappearances since Lucinda's daughter was on the podcast way back when, and I think it was actually 2017. I've learned a lot. And back then, it was like, oh, this was 100% foul play. And I think that foul play is still the most prominent choice. But it's interesting that when I had a chance to talk about this disappearance with the think tank, and once again, I'm going to say it again, you all should be part of the think tank on Patreon. Please sign up. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be well worth it. I know some of you are already supporting other podcasts, YouTube channels, or whatever on Patreon. Maybe think about a change. I think we're doing good work here. If you think Unfound is doing good work, you should be part of the think tank. It's going to mean something. Being part of the think tank, signing up, it means something. It's constructive work, and you get to talk to me and a lot of other listeners in a very private way, in depth, and then I take that information back to the guests. So it's more than just supporting. You're actually having Unfound. You're actually having an impact on how the future investigation of that disappearance could go. So think about it. But it was interesting in talking to the members of the think tank about Lucinda's, because we did not get to do that because the think tank didn't exist back in 2017, but we got to do it now. Some things about her, her possessions being left in that men's room at Busch Gardens, and really trying to put together a scenario, a foul play scenario that made sense, start thinking about it, it's a little tough. It's pretty difficult to do that. And if she did get abducted by somebody, why didn't somebody just take everything? And if this is something where she was taken into that men's room or lured in there, then why were there no signs of a struggle or anything like that? And how far would she have had to have been dragged or carried or whatever else to a car or something? And why would that person leave her stuff there and then, of course, making it look like she actually was abducted? It's a little hard to understand. And in that way, her disappearance is unique. So I think that at least a little bit I've backed away from the foul play angle. And you have to remember, she was very young. She was only 17, already had 2 kids. She was already married. And I can't really rule out the idea that she just started a new life somewhere. I'm more open to that. I'm not saying it's over 50%. It's certainly not. But just the way, listening to the interview again, talking to the members of the think tank, really tapping into everything that we've covered on Unfound, all 300-some disappearances now, it's just opened my mind to that a little more. Whereas, like I said, back in 2017, this is absolutely foul play, no doubt. Now, not as sure. I realize there might have been a serial killer in the area at the time, but doesn't really, to me, it really didn't fit that guy's modus operandi and leaving the possessions behind and things. So I was really open to the idea that it was some guy there who knew Lucinda. It was one of the women, one of her guy friends that did something. Not as sure about that now, especially considering Lucinda's age. So there you go. That's the update. It was a revisitation episode. I was happy to do that again. And you should know, within the last couple years, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office actually had a podcast for a little while. They actually talked about Lucinda's disappearance on that podcast as well. I think it was called Unfinished Business. It only ran for a short time. I don't know why it stopped. But you might find that out there somewhere as well. It's out there. It's just the podcast isn't going on, I think, these days. But I think those episodes are still available if you want to see what the Pinellas or Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office has to say about Lucinda's disappearance from the 1980s. Next update, Donald Irwin. Now, this is really just a follow-up. Donald Irwin was a 59-year-old from Camdenton, Missouri. He was a Navy veteran and loved to tinker with electronics and machines. On December 29th, 2013, he got up early, as he usually did, and headed down to the local store to pick up some cigarettes. He was never seen again. It was, of course, we were still waiting for the scientific evidence, I think, back at the end of December when the last update episode came out. But now it's for sure, that Donald Irwin was found, and he was identified as being deceased. Remember that his car was found, but they said that there was no body in it, and then they said that, they found human remains in that pond, and they still need to be tested. Well, we now know that for sure, that Donald Irwin was dead in that pond. And it doesn't sound to me like there's any chance of foul play. You should know, I still don't know where this pond is. I will admit that I've not had a chance to talk to any his family members recently. I've not asked. I asked that back at the time when it was going on, but it was still an ongoing investigation. But I've not attempted to ask that recently, so I don't know now if it's a big secret or not. I have to admit that. This is a disappearance. I think at the time when the episode came out, that maybe some people were thinking, well, his wife was acting kind of strange and she was having people over and everything. But I think we can say with quite a bit of certainty now that there was no foul play and that Donald chose to end his life on his own terms. I would admit that driving your car into a pond, that seems like an unusual way, but I still think that that's what happened. It's hard for me to think about that because I don't have those kind of thoughts. I can maybe understand like people jump off bridges or jump out of buildings or use a gun or something like that, but this seems like a pretty slow, agonizing way to take your own life to me. And I'm going to guess that this way is not chosen by too many people. Now, we do know, of course, I guess it's kind of the same thing as people jumping off of cruise ships. And I think a lot of those are suicides, although certainly some of those people could be drunk and maybe not totally understand what they're doing. But I certainly believe a lot of those are suicides as well. It kind of feels to me like that. If you jump off the top railing of a cruise ship and you don't die after you hit the water, that's going to be, I can't even think about it. It's just morbid, sad, depressing. That's a slow way to go. And that's kind of how I look at this with Donald. But I think that's what happened. So once again, we have a situation where a missing person is found with his car. And I continue to say, although there is an exception like Eric Franks, for the most part, the longer a disappearance goes where a person and his or her car are missing, more likely they are going to be found together. I guess Nico Lisi's is another exception. And forgive me, I have some sinus stuff going on here. But this is another, maybe it's just a theory. It's not a law because there are exceptions to it. It's a pretty good guess that when you get to disappearances being this old like Donald's, that you're most likely going to find the person and the car together. And so very sad, but I don't think that the result here is a surprise. Next update, Al Copper. And this is just kind of a interesting story. Albert Leroy Copper was a 28-year-old from Avonmore, Pennsylvania. He was a new father and loved working on Mustangs. On June 6th, 2013, he got up early, as he usually did, to head to work. Albert never arrived at his job, and his car was found abandoned on a dirt trail later that morning. He was never seen again. When I was up seeing my dad in March, he was getting his taxes done, and he had to take them to a tax guy that he's known for, I don't know, way back since his teaching days, which is a long, long time ago now, in a town called Vandergrift, which is in Westmoreland County. And which is near where I grew up in Leechburg. Not very near where my dad lives now, though. And it just so happened, I went with him there with my dad. We parked, and he's, like I said, he's known this guy for a while, so he wanted to stick around and talk for a little bit. But both the tax guy and this woman who works with him, I don't know if it's assistant secretary, maybe she does taxes too, I'm not totally sure. Well, they both live in Avonmore, coincidentally, where Al Copper went missing. And so I don't think that they probably, at least the guy knew that my dad has a son, me. And so we started, of course, I'm there. My dad's dropping off this tax stuff. Or was he paying? I think we were picking it up, actually. And he mentioned, well, Ed does these, these disappearances, and I have this podcast and everything. And I don't know if it was I who brought it up or they brought it up about Avonmore, but somehow I said, "Oh, you're from Avonmore." Yeah, I covered a disappearance there, Al Copper, and they remember that. Of course, Al's disappearance fairly new. And we started talking about his disappearance and how, people were really puzzled and everything. But I got the sense that, and this is one of those maybe interviews that I think if I were doing it now in 2024, that it might go a little differently than it did back then. That we probably would have tampered down some of the speculation, some of the stories that Al's brother Matt wanted to tell. And I think both these people who once lived there in Avonmore were there when it happened, still continue to live there. And Avonmore is a very, very small town. Very small. Even smaller than the town where I grew up, Leechburg. I think they were much more grounded in what they suspected happened to Al. They did not really believe in any foul play allegations or conspiracy or anything like that. Just the local thinking on his disappearances is just a guy who had some things going on and decided to leave his life or commit suicide. I don't think anybody there is really thinking that it was foul play. So it was interesting to me. I didn't expect to get that while I was in Pennsylvania, getting the local insight into Al Copper's disappearance, but I did. And it was interesting to get some locals' insight into it, especially since I don't think either of them are into true crime or into disappearances or anything else. But I don't get that too often, being that I'm here in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And I'd love to, one of these days, I'd love to go to all of the areas, every single spot where we've covered disappearances on Unfound. In fact, my brother and I have talked about that with his RV, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. But we've thrown around the idea, at least. So maybe one of these days I'll get to do that. And I think I would really enjoy that. Not just getting to meet, of course, a lot of these families still live in the areas where the disappearance occurred, but maybe going around and talking to locals about the disappearances and see what they have to say. So I got a chance to do that, and it was interesting. And I more and more I think that Al was going through some stuff and dumped his car and took off into the woods somewhere by himself, and there was no foul play. So that's the update. Getting to talk to some locals, actually people who live in Avonmore, and get their insight into Al Copper's disappearance. Next update, Tom Brown. Thomas Kelly Brown was an 18-year-old from Canadian Texas. He was president of his class and loved acting and public speaking. On the night of November 23rd, 2016, Thomas was on his way home after hanging out with friends. He stopped to get gas in his Dodge Durango. He was never seen again. What I have here, one of the few things that I will be reading for this update episode is the continuing litigation, I guess you might call it, between Phil Klein and Michael Crane and others in the Canadian Amarillo area of Texas. So this was posted on Phil Klein's Facebook page back in March. Over the past week, we have received press inquiries into the rumors of this firm entering into a lawsuit under the Texas Open Records Act with the city of Abernathy, Texas, in the Thomas Brown case. We can confirm the rumors to be true. This past November, we were advised by state law enforcement that Michael Crane, who reported himself to be a former quote-unquote state investigator and a former Navy SEAL to the public and former employers on a radio show, was employed by USA Investigations of Lubbock, Texas. According to state records, he still is. As well, the company's president is Dwayne Reed. According to government documents, Mr. Reed is also the police chief in the city of Abernathy, Texas. In further examination, it was determined that Pine Gregory, who was involved in the Thomas Brown case as a police officer and left under the suggestion of a Brady notice for his actions as a police officer for the Hemphill County Sheriff's Office, was employed with the city of Abernathy and under the management of Chief Reed. As well, Mr. Gregory found Tom's body. In December of 2023, this firm filed a 552 request for open records request for certain documents on both Chief Reed and Officer Gregory. In January, we did not receive an answer within the 10-day notice period. In fact, we received zero correspondence. This firm filed a second 552 request once again, and again within the 10-day notice period, we received zero correspondence. Contact was then made with the mayor of the city and the city attorney. We received an email from the lawyer for the city who said he would help with the matter. Then, after 2 more weeks, we heard nothing after emailing the attorney and his paralegal. During the entire time, we heard nothing from the mayor of Abernathy. As well, the city attorney stopped all communications with us. This past month, we sent a letter to the Texas Attorney General in notification of the violation of the state-mandated time period and the state-mandated document return under the law. The state gave as well clearance to the file suit against the city of Abernathy for the requested documents and fully unredacted information as the time period expired, and the city of Abernathy lost all rights to withhold any of the documents. There is no appeal. The city of Abernathy will be responsible for all legal fees. We believe, again, that the employees of the government and their council work for the people of Texas, ignoring a lawful filing and bringing down a shade of non-transparency creates more transparency creates more questions than answers. But that has been the problem in the Brown case. And Philip R. Klein, lead investigator. You're probably asking me, what do I make of this? I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, are we saying now, I don't know. Does somebody in Abernathy know what happened to Tom Brown? I get it. I mean, although we don't file a lot of FOIAs here, which may be different what they're talking about here, it's not unusual to not get anything back. And it's not unusual for some jurisdiction to not, they have so many days or whatever to get back, and they don't get back to you. Never has occurred to me, and like I said, we haven't done this much because I don't like waiting around for information like that. Sometimes, although I did get information, a big, huge file for Jennifer Perry from a few years ago. Very surprised by that. But it's never occurred to me that filing for information and they don't get back to me, that I would ever file suit against them or anything. Maybe I should. Maybe Phil Klein's teaching me that I should. I don't know. I get it that Phil Klein's ticked off at Michael Crane. I think for very good reasons. I'm not taking a side here. I think everybody knows my attitude toward Phil Klein and Michael Crane and all of this. That I, of course, have not taken sides on any of this. I really don't have a lot of respect for any of these people. I'm not saying they're shady or corrupt or anything else. I just don't think. I think this has just become sensationalism all around. And a lot of people are to blame for that. So I don't know where this is going. Here's what I think I know. Phil Klein could have gotten all of this information just as he wanted, and we still wouldn't be any closer to knowing absolutely 100% what happened to Tom Brown, whether it was a suicide, an accident, a murder, or anything else. I'm pretty sure about that. I guess by the letter of the law, Philip Klein is correct here. I just doesn't seem to me that in this statement that he made on his Facebook page, and he can write, I guess, anything he wants on his Facebook page. I suppose Facebook could delete it, but for the most part, Facebook's probably going to let you write whatever you want to write. I think it's still fairly unclear here what he's hoping to get out of this information in the first place. maybe he would like to do another Facebook post on that. What are you looking to exactly get? Just because Michael Crane's employed there or Pine Gregory's employed there, what are you implying? So I can't imagine anything of this really has anything to do with the investigation into what actually happened to Tom. That's the way I look at it. I may be proven wrong. If I am, I'll let you know. Next update, Peggy Maguire. Peggy Ann Maguire was a 28-year-old from Eufaula, Oklahoma. She had a son and raised farm animals. On November 16th, 2015, Peggy dropped her son off at school. Her plan was to then go home to work on plans for a new porch on her house. She was never seen again. The update here is that there was a new search, and I'm going to read the article to you right now. Peggy Maguire was declared missing in November of 2015, last seen in McIntosh County. 8 years later, no progress has been made with the search for her until now. On Wednesday, not like this past Wednesday, it's been a little while. Like I said, this is all information since the beginning of January. On Wednesday, the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office followed up on a tip. The Maguire's body is wrapped in chicken wire, held down under the surface of a pond south of Washington Avenue in the town of Oktaha. I know I just butchered that. There were some people that knew Peggy back in 2015. They were hearing stuff. They were talking amongst themselves, one place or the other. One gentleman has moved away, and he's the person that's been calling us and saying you might want to go to Oktaha and check the pond. I believe she's going to be in there, said Bert Poole, an investigator with the Muskogee County District Attorney's Office. The Sheriff's Office and the Light Horse Police Department began their search just before noon on Wednesday. After about 3 hours of searching, unfortunately, there wasn't any clues. Poole said they will continue to search for Maguire to give her family answers. We can contact our resources or contact the people that's been calling us and maybe get another area of the pond, but we're just not going to give up. We want to try again to locate a victim. For our family, really needs to have that closure, Poole said. Maguire's mother shared the following video seeking help from the community as she continues searching for her daughter. My understanding on all of this is to also remind you to go a few more into the details of her disappearance. Was it her ex-husband or estranged husband? Was it the house? And, of course, he claimed that whether she didn't come home or if he wasn't there when she came home or he didn't see her come home, something like that. And I'm not sure a lot of people in that area are necessarily believing that. And there was also a story that he was seen that morning driving down the road in like a, what do they call them, a high lift? With the bucket in the front that was like raised way high in the air, and he was just flying down the road in one of these types of machinery. Or was it a backhoe? You know, like they have the one claw in the back, but they have like a bucket type of mechanism in the front. Look at me. Can't explain these things, even though I worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation for 3 summers. But it was something like that, and he was going down the road, and this high lift, this bucket was raised high in the air. And, of course, Peggy was never seen again. My understanding is where she lived and this pond, not really that close to each other. So my interpretation, could be wrong, is that this is just locals talking. Just rumors floating about. I'm glad the police want to act on some of it, give it a shot. I'm happy about that. It's been 9 years, and they're still willing to go out and go into a pond and do that. That's more than a lot of police departments are going to do, hence the reason that Adventures with Purpose and Chaos Divers and all these other groups exist now. But it just kind of has that feeling that this was a rumor circulating around, and there really weren't any facts to back it up. And so that's the update for Peggy Maguire. Next update, Angie Yarnell. Michelle Angela Yarnell, Angie to those who loved her most, was a 28-year-old from Ivy Bend, Missouri. She was a big Cyndi Lauper fan and loved animals. On October 25th, coincidentally my mother's birthday, 2003, her husband came home from work to find her gone. He later told Angie's family that she ran off with another man. She was never seen again. Of course, we now know that he ended up changing his story. The husband changed his story that Angie hit her head and died, and then he wanted to give her a burial out in this island in some lake there. And while he was taking her body out to the lake, the body fell out of the canoe or boat or raft or whatever it was, and he couldn't find her body in the water. That's the story he told. And he ended up going to jail for a few years, and now he is a free man. The update for this is, very unfortunately, that Angie's mother, Marianne Asher Chapman, died. Very sad. And actually, Angie's father died just a couple years ago. But Marianne was the guest for the episode. And she was just not Angie's mother. She was a force to behold. Once her daughter went missing and everything, she became a huge advocate, worker, volunteer within the missing persons community. And my impression is that at least a few of Unfound's other guests knew her, even though their loved ones didn't disappear in Missouri. That is how well known Marianne Asher Chapman was. And when I think of Marianne, although I had not spoken to her for a while before she died, that she was known to go out by herself, of course, after her husband died. She would just go out and look for her daughter in the woods. She'd take a shovel, she'd take another piece of tools, and she would just walk around that area of Ivy Bend, Missouri, looking for her daughter. Of course, the reason she was doing that is because she didn't believe the husband's story about how Angie ended up in a lake. I mean, can you imagine? It's just, oh, baby. Overwhelming to think that anybody would just randomly go out there into the woods. No other help, nothing. Just her and nature going out there trying to find her daughter. It's just, it's very powerful. It's also very tragic. And you love to see that kind of energy, but in a way also it's very melancholy. So, but she was a force. That's what I remember about her. I think that's what a lot of people who knew her thought of her. And she became a great spokesperson within the missing persons community. And it's very, very sad to see her go. And I don't think she was even 70 years old yet. And on that note, maybe at this time I should tell you that it's now, and we're going to mention another death of another guest here in a bit, but that's now 10 guests of Unfound who have died. And I will just read them off to you right now. Vicki Wilkerson, mother of Jennifer Wilkerson. Jessica Curtis, of course, sister of Tyler Stice. Tessie Palmer, mother of Marina Bolter. Janice Norwood, mother of Kimberly Norwood. Of course, Marianne Asher Chapman. Katie Lancaster, sister-in-law of Megan Lancaster. Donna Jean Kapp, sister of Dorianne Myers. Tanya Washburn, that would be April Andrews' half-sister. She was the guest. And then the one we're going to get to is Joanne Decker, sister of Shelva Rafy. And then another one we're going to get to, another person who has died within the last few months, is Bruce Ricketts, who was not a family member, but he was the guest for the disappearance of those 6 young men in Canada, the Pickering Six. And I'll, of course, talk a little bit more about him when we get to Joanne and Bruce. So that is now Vicki, Jessica, Tessie, Janice, Marianne, Katie, Donna Jean, Tanya, Joanne, Bruce. That's now 10. And what do I say every time? And because I mean it, it hurts every time. Next update, Tyler North. Tyler North was a 27-year-old from Harlan County, Kentucky. He was the father of two and loved hunting and fishing. On the evening of Sunday, June 24th, 2018, Tyler left his sisters. He was allegedly headed home. However, Tyler turned into a local park instead. He was never seen again. I think this is one I think that has made it in every update episode for the last couple years. We're still waiting for that trial of his ex-wife, her boyfriend. There was somebody else who was involved after the fact. We're still waiting for a trial, this murder trial. But I've heard, a little birdie has told me maybe that it's going to be happening in May. So a month from now sometime. We shall see. But, they've been in custody for a while now. I've been talking about this for a while. Why is it taking so long? I don't know exactly what's going on. In Kentucky, they don't seem to be as efficient as maybe Colorado and how quickly they charged and then brought Steve Pankey to trial twice. But when the trial happens, I will keep tabs on it, and I'll let you know. But no trial yet. Next update, and probably one of the biggest updates Unfound has ever done in all 17 episodes of update episodes. Mary Jane Van Gilder was a 34-year-old living alone in Shelby, Ohio. She was a mother of five and worked at a World War II depot. Around the beginning of April 1945, Mary Jane's oldest daughter, who lived in West Virginia, started receiving the letters back that she had tried to mail to her mother. Mary Jane had seemingly moved without giving a forwarding address. She was never seen again. This is still the oldest disappearance Unfound has ever covered, but is now not the oldest unsolved disappearance because back in February, it was revealed that Mary Jane Van Gilder had been tracked down. And this disappearance had been solved 100%. There is no room for conjecture or more theorizing or anything else. She was found. And so now the oldest unsolved disappearance that we've covered was just what we covered recently with Heather Grotman, and that was Ricky Jean Bryant. So the big news here is from Shelby, Ohio. While the mystery of what happened to Mary Jane Van Gilder has been solved, questions about her two lives likely will linger forever. Shelby Police Detective Adam Turner has doggedly pursued the case for the last 5.5 years. He held a press conference Monday morning, back in February. My sister was there, at the Kehoe Center to announce the results of the investigation. Van Gilder had last been seen in the Shelby area in 1945. Originally from West Virginia, Van Gilder moved to Ohio in 1944 to work at the Wilkins Army Air Force Depot in Shelby. If you don't know, at one time the Army and Air Force were all one division of the United States military. On March 8th, 1945, she resigned from her job, citing added household duties. It turns out Van Gilder had a second secret life and family, and neither family knew about the other. It's not quite right about how that's written. In October 2018, the Shelby Police Department received a Facebook message from Mindy Wilson, one of Van Gilder's granddaughters. Police Chief Lance Combs assigned the case to Turner, who has been looking ever since. Turner caught a break in the cold case when he obtained Van Gilder's military file and published it online. A civilian sleuth, as Turner called her, had been following the case. In November 2023, the woman came across the name Percy L. Sebren, S-E-B-R-E-N. When Van Gilder was promoted to high-lift fork operator, she took the position from Sebren and likely received training from him. This name was among dozens of others located throughout Mary Jane's military file, but it would be this one alone that would prove crucial. Searching Sebren's history on findagrave.com, Turner learned the man died in Kansas City, Missouri in 1969. It also showed he was married to a Mary J. Sebren. who was born on November 19th, 1911, and died in 1990. Both were buried in Forest, Louisiana. Sebring had been run over by a train. He and his wife had two sons, one in 1945, the second in 1947. The older son was born 9 months after Van Gilder left her position at the Wilkins Army Air Force Depot. This was probably the reason for her listing added household duties, Turner said. He did, however, track down one of the Sebring's granddaughters, Bobby Sebring, providing him with photos of her grandmother from the late 1970s and early 1980s. She told me that she didn't know much about her grandmother's life and that it was not discussed. The detective contacted Moxie Forensic Investigations to do a side-by-side photo enhancement. He also received a document from the grandchildren with her signature. Comparing it to Mary Jane Van Gilder's signature showed distinct similarities in how each letter was shaped and formatted. Mary Jane Sebring had somehow obtained and was using a different social security number than the one we found in her military file. Turner was getting closer. Additional photos of Mary Jane and her husband confirmed what Turner already knew. A DNA test made it official. Mary Jane Sebring was without a doubt Mary Jane Van Gilder. According to the grandchildren from her second family, Mary Jane was the perfect grandmother. She loved to garden, with her favorite flower being the hydrangea. My mother's up in heaven saying, Ed, you just killed the name of that flower. She liked sun tea and was a great cook. Sebring / Van Gilder died from colon cancer. She was cremated and buried next to her husband after living the majority of her life after 1945 in Arkansas. So Mary Jane Van Gilder ran off with her, I guess he might have been her superior, probably because they were having an affair. She got pregnant and knew she couldn't go back to West Virginia being pregnant. So she ran off with him, and she lived in the southern United States, had another child with this guy. He ended up dying in 1969, got hit by a train. Was that suicide? I don't know if we'll ever know. But she lived until 1990, and there's the rest of the story here that I'm not going to read. But what came out from this presentation back in February was that Mary Jane, knowing that she was going to die, had told one of her grandchildren that she had a big secret and that she hoped nobody would ever find out. Well, I don't know. Maybe unfortunately for her or fortunate for us, or I don't know how you want to look at it. Well, we now know what that big secret was. And I'm guessing that she must have lived from 1945 to 1990, 45 years, always looking over her shoulder. Now, what she couldn't have probably guessed, I don't know how many people could have guessed it back, any lay people anyway, that DNA would come along in the 1990s and would be able to test people, and it would become, very sophisticated science. She probably could have never guessed that in 1990. I'm guessing that when she died, she thought the probability of anybody ever figuring out who she really was probably was next to zero. And, of course, it did take, once DNA came in the mid-1990s, it still took almost 30 years. But science finally caught up with Mary Jane Van Gilder. And, a couple things here, though. I asked Adam this a couple days after the presentation because it wasn't, I don't think he ever really talked about it in the presentation, or it wasn't clear to me. Did she and this new guy get married? Adam has never been able to find a marriage certificate. So it very well may be that they pretended to be married, but they couldn't get married because she didn't have a proper identification. That is a possibility. I think what this also means is that this new guy knew that she was married. and that she had a family in West Virginia. I'm pretty sure about that. Being that you can't find a marriage certificate, and it seemed like they were pretending to be married, that kind of gives, what do they say, like an air of guilt, like a guilty conscience or something like that, I guess is the feeling that I get about it. Because, like I said, when this all came out, there was talk. Well, did he know? Did he even know that, he was running off with a woman who already had a husband and kids? I think he did. And so, of course, he would have been worrying about probably looking over his shoulder too, worrying that his wife, although technically he wasn't, she wasn't his wife, worried that she was going to get caught for what she did and everybody would find out about it and everything else. So probably lived, of course, he lived, 24 years, 45 to 69 with him. But she had to live with that for 45 years. Can't imagine it. Of course, the other big issue regarding this, and I hope everybody will remember this whole thing, it's a cliche within the true crime community, and I hate it. The saying, well, she would never leave her kids. We hear that so much. Well, I guess we hear it with guys too. He would never leave his kids. Parents are leaving their children all the time. It's disgusting and everything. Now, I get, and having seen some conversations that have happened since this all came out in February, she was thinking, she might have been thinking, well, she was pregnant, I'm pretty sure. So once again, that kind of paints her into corner about what she could do. But I have to admit, I'm not even inclined to believe that she would have gone back to West Virginia if she wasn't pregnant. I think she saw a way out of an abusive relationship. She thought that otherwise that her husband, although she was abusive to her, he wasn't abusive to the kids, that they would be fine, and she decided to move on. I think this happens more than we know, although maybe it doesn't involve the changing of identities and everything else. So parents do leave their kids. It's just something that happens. So we can't always just use that. That is just a cliche. Now, when we get into like the man said type of disappearances, and they're living under the same roof, and the guy says, I don't know what happened to her. Her car's here, her purse here, her phone's here, and everything else. I don't know what happened to her. Of course, we have a really good inkling what happened. Yes, those women did not leave their kids. But outside of those types of scenarios, I'm inclined to believe that women leave their children and men leave their children. So I tend to maybe be a little more open-minded on this topic than I think most of the people who take an interest in disappearances and murders, just the general true crime community. I'm much more open-minded to this than I think most people are. So if you're ever wondering, if you're ever really questioning that, maybe getting into that cliche mode, just remember Mary Jane Van Gilder. Had kids back in West Virginia, ran off with another guy, lived with him for 45 years, seemingly lived an otherwise pretty good life. Everybody seemed to think very highly of her, but she left her kids. Shocker. I have to admit that when we featured Mary Jane Van Gilder's disappearance, what was that, 3 years ago or something now? Of course, I guess logic would dictate that you think the most likely disappearance to not be solved is the oldest one you covered. Well, that is certainly, I was certainly maybe not thinking correctly about that. And so this is maybe, 31, 32, 33, somewhere in there of disappearances that we've featured that have been solved now, somewhere in there. And so we have like 300 others that are, all of them being more recent, that are still unsolved. Just weird how that works out sometimes. And by the way, I'll say one more thing about this. This is why nobody should ever give up hope. And I guess kind of fortunately that there were family members who were wondering what happened to Mary Jane van Gilder for all these years that finally got to find out what happened to her. I guess it's a little bit bittersweet, but it's now a mystery that has been removed from their lives, and maybe they can rest a little easier because of that, even though they now know that she left her kids for another man. Next update, Phyllis Corbin. Phyllis Marie Corbin was a 16-year-old from St. Louis, Missouri. She had behavior issues that caused her to be sent to a juvenile shelter a couple of times. In late September of 1963, Phyllis was scheduled to be released after spending a month at the facility. According to paperwork, Phyllis left for home. The next day, someone allegedly saw her at a local bar. She was never seen again. Really can't say too much, can't get into any specifics on this. All that I will say is that this might be another Mary Jane van Gilder situation where a woman has been tracked down who is still alive here in 2024 who could be Phyllis. And her DNA is being checked as we speak, and that is about all I can say about that. If you're wondering, well, what do you think this is? Does it sound real? Doesn't it sound real? And of course, I'm getting this information from the guest for that episode. At this point, it's very early on. I really don't know what to make of it. All that I will tell you, what the logic tells me, of course, we know how many times these disappearances fly in the face of logic, that this woman agreed to have her DNA tested tells me that this is probably not Phyllis. It seems to me that if this really was Phyllis, she would just spare all the drama and just say, yep, I'm her, I'm she, and this is what I've been doing all these years, but this woman, to my knowledge, has not done this. So, and I really can't get into how this all came about. That is all off the record, secret for now. But a woman has been swabbed. We'll see what the results are. Next update, Julie Weflin. And pardon me once again, got this sinus stuff going on. Very unusual for this time of year for me. Julianne Weflin was a 28-year-old from Deer Park, Washington. She worked for the Bonneville Power Administration and loved the outdoors. On September 16, 1987, on her way home, Julie stopped at a substation to make sure it was working correctly. Julie never made it home. She was never seen again. Remember that when she didn't make it home, everybody started looking for her. They found her truck at the substation, and something of a violent nature had happened, or I think her helmet was on the ground, and there were drag marks, and the truck door was open. You remember friend of the program, John Polis, who was a fellow employee of Julie's at the time, was the guest. I say that we need a lot more John Polises out there. If you can believe it, John is in his late 70s and is still teaching high school, is still a high school teacher. It's like he's had all these different kind of jobs, and he's in his late 70s teaching high school students. I can't even imagine it. But he's a fascinating guy, even though he and I certainly differ on our theories regarding Julie's disappearance. Still, great guy, always interesting to talk to, very interesting guy. And like I said, we need more people like them, people who are willing to put their spare time and look into this in a very structured way, very logical way, very organized way. We need more people out there who are accountants and engineers and teachers and everything and everybody else, every other profession, who in their spare time maybe want to work on a disappearance like John has. So the update here is that John had alerted me that there is a guy who has done some true crime writing that now wants to do a disappearance on, wants to do a book on Julie's disappearance, and he wants to add in the, two other women who went missing around the same time in that area. And I had a chance to talk to this guy when I was up seeing my dad in March of course, last month. And we had a great conversation. How long did we talk? I guess it was over a half hour, but maybe less than an hour. We really got into a few details. And I told him that I want to be a resource for him. I told him I certainly do have a certain point of view regarding Julie's disappearance. Just talked about my experience and kind of comparing it to other disappearances. And I think he found it all very interesting. At least if he didn't, he certainly made me feel like he did. But I think probably the best news about it is that, at least what he told me, he doesn't really he's not really leaning, and I don't even know if any of his particular theories will come out in his book. He told me that once he writes it, like a rough draft of it, he'd love for me to take a look at it and give my input on it. I can do that. It might take me some time to get through it, depending on how long the book is, but doesn't seem to be leaning very heavily toward Will Parks, which is, of course, John Polis's best suspect. I told this author exactly what I've kind of told you, although I don't make a lot of my theories known. But what makes more sense to me is that she was attacked and taken by somebody who knew she was going to be there by herself. That makes more sense to me than Will Parks just happening to drive by, happening to see her, happening to turn around or whatever, and nobody's seeing any of this. Of course, there's this witness. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to believe this witness or not. It just seems unlikely to me. And what seems more likely is, somebody who somehow knew that she was going to be there. Of course, she's working, one of the few females. If you remember, Julie, kind of easy on the eyes. Very well could be a coworker, knew that she was going to be out there. She stops there. He pulls in pretending like he wants to help her and tries this, tries that. And an attack happens. Now, of course, that would take more time than somebody just drives by and just abducts her. But, any of these things are going to take time. She put up a fight. She was taken. She certainly wasn't looking to jump into a car. She certainly didn't hitchhike her way away from that location or anything. So anytime, any kind of scenario we're going to think about that goes along with what we know about the scene is going to take some time. Just the question is how much time? But that's the reason I just think that random abductions happen. Strangers, of course. Allegedly, Julie and Will were not strangers. But now what I'm finding out, I think this is what this guy told me, is that this whole thing about Julie and Will both being in this club, this hiking club or whatever it was, this came up in the conversation. Will was in it, but Julie was not. So that kind of then undermines this whole idea that Will was mad at Julie because she got him kicked out, or he liked her and she didn't like him or anything. What this guy told me is that she was not in that club. Will was, but she wasn't. So this even more kind of takes me in that direction of somebody knew that she was there and found out about it somehow at the end of that day, and went over there and did this to her. It very well might not have been something romantic. Maybe this person felt like maybe she took his position or something, or she got promoted, he didn't, or something like that. It doesn't necessarily, I guess, have to be sexual motivation, even though that usually is the most common motivation in these types of situations. So there you go. I guess a book's going to be coming out about Julie's disappearance along with these two other women. And when it does, I'll let you know. Next update. And this kind of, I foreshadowed this some minutes ago. Shelva Rafy. Shelva Jean Rafy was a 44-year-old from Pittston, Pennsylvania. She had four children and came from a large family. On the evening of May 28th, 2006, Shelva and her on-again, off-again boyfriend went to a graduation party. After, they went back to his place where they got into a fight, and Shelva decided to walk the mile and a half home. She was never seen again. Two things here. One, like I already mentioned, unfortunately, Shelva's one sister, if you remember going back to that episode, I actually interviewed two of her sisters. And I just recently, I've I'm kind of have let this slip, and I'll just make this public. I've kind of let this slip, keeping in contact with some of Unfound's guests, just to be honest. And I really put this as something that's important for me to do in 2024. And I'm trying to email at least one or two of them every day. And I was just going down the list, and I came to Shelva's disappearance. And so I thought that, got to contact them. Man, I haven't talked to Joanne and Shirley for a while. And it was Shirley who got back to me, and we talked on the phone, and she let me know that Joanne actually died last summer. So the summer of 2023. It sounds like she had gotten sick. It doesn't sound to me like it was something that was sudden. It seems like she had been fighting maybe some illnesses for a while. So very sad. And the thing about it is, originally when I found out about Shelva's disappearance, it was actually Joanne I spoke to first. And then Shirley came in, and like I said, we eventually did that interview, the three of us. So Joanne Decker, very sadly deceased. The other piece of information, and this is something that it's on my notes to follow up on now that I'm back here in Florida, that I really need to do this, is that Shirley put me in contact with somebody kind of new that's been helping her. And if that person is listening to this, I've been meaning to reach back out to you. Just a lot of things going on. People flaking on interviews and such, which always adds more stuff to my workload. I want to talk to this person, new person, looking into this. If you remember Shelva's disappearance, certainly could believe that she went off all on her own. But on the other hand, there was enough information, I think, that was covered back in that episode to think that I guess it could be foul play too. This is not, it's kind of one of those tweeners. It's not absolutely 100% a walk-off, and it's not exactly 100% of the man said where you think the guy did it. It's very much in the middle of the range there, so it's just hard to say. So I hope I can talk to this person, this new person working with Shirley, and maybe we can have a very constructive conversation. But mainly, Joanne Decker is no longer with us. Very sad. Next update, Gregory House. Gregory Downs House was a 42-year-old from Mendocino County, California. He loved to golf and was a playwright. On the evening of June 17th, 1997, Greg went to the Rancho Canada golf course in Carmel Valley to play around, but he didn't come home that night. The next morning, Greg's cart and clubs were found on the 13th tee. He was never seen again. And the update here is, first of all, out of nowhere, a couple months ago, and this also was along the lines why I really, really got to keep better in touch with some of Unfound's guests. Some of them I talk to all the time. They're on Facebook a lot. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm easy to reach and everything, but then other ones aren't. And this is one of those. I, out of nowhere, a few months ago, got an email from Greg's wife. You remember her name is Sherry Glazer, Glaser. She was the guest, just out of nowhere. And it was great to hear from her. And I emailed her back. I think we had maybe just a couple emails back and forth, and that was about it. But it was great to hear from her. And I just, what we talked about, I'm just going to keep it off the record. But what is also interesting to me, though, is that she has recently done some interviews regarding Greg's disappearance. And this is really my perception. I actually looked into this. Of course, this is what this update episode is all about. She really hasn't done much media over the years. And in fact, her interview with me was one of the few things that she has done in the 21st century regarding Greg's disappearance. That's not a criticism. That's just a fact. But she's done actually some interviews here in 2024, and it's great to see. She certainly, if you don't know, she's a performer. She's performed in New York City, all over the place, and she does a one-woman show. She's very well known in the theater community of the United States. I don't know if she's ever been on any TV shows or movies or anything, but certainly within the theater community, she's very well known. And so she's done interviews about her performing and all of that, but these interviews are just geared toward Greg and his disappearance. I'm not going to read any of the articles, because really what we went over in the interview that I did with her from a few years ago. But I'm so happy that she's doing that. I don't know how they came about. I haven't asked her. Was somebody like me finding out about her disappearance and just contacting her, or did she reach out to local media in California? I don't know. But it's so good to see that, because I know she hasn't done that, at least local media, for a very, very long time. So I'm hoping this is, once again, maybe I can only, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much of myself, but maybe her interview with me a couple years ago maybe finally kind of put her in the mood for that. Because the way I remember it, we got along great. She did a fantastic interview. On the other hand, I would not call her one of the more eager people to appear on Unfound. She wasn't resistant, but you should know there are some guests who, just, well, when are going to do this? I'm ready to do this. And then there are others that really, 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 they're afraid. You got fear here, a lot of different fears and anxieties and everything. I just don't know how friendly Sherry was to the media, speaking about her missing husband. It's a tough conversation. So I'm hoping maybe that her talking to me maybe kind of started putting that in her mind that she needed to do that. And if so, I'm happy to have done that for her. Or it may just be a coincidence or something. But it's great to see her out there and being interviewed, especially local media. And maybe it will ring a bell. Somebody will remember something and, maybe put this on the front burner again for that area of California. Next update, Christian Balky Thompson. Christian Balky Thompson was a 26-year-old from Farnhamville, Iowa. He was a skateboarder and the father of two. In the early morning of hours of May 3rd, 2020, so we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary, Christian was seen at a convenience store with a female friend. 36 hours later, Christian's car was found on fire at a farm. He was never seen again. If you'll remember, that woman that knew Christian drove his car to this location, and then it seems that the guy who owned this property attempted to at least burn part of the car, but the whole car caught on fire, and then it caught his building on fire, and the fire department saw it, or somebody saw it, and the fire department shows up, they find Christian's car there. Now, obviously, that was not the way it was supposed to go down. Obviously, I think they were supposed to burn that car so nobody would ever know that the car was there, something like that. Didn't go as planned. And this also should kind of remind all of you, when you start thinking about these very intricate plans that you think were put into action to cause disappearances, people to disappear, always remember Christian Balky Thompson. No good plan goes unpunished. So the update is that there was a search, and I'm going to read about it right now. Law enforcement were seen digging at the 22,300 block, 22300 block of 150th Street in Carroll County, where missing person Christian Balky Thompson's vehicle was thought to be burned in 2020. It wasn't thought to be burned. It was burned. Carroll County Sheriff Ken Pingree said Thursday morning that the investigation is continuing with nothing new to report. Balky Thompson in Farnhamville was reported missing on May 3rd of 2020. He's still listed as a missing person by the Iowa Department of Public Safety. Balky Thompson was 26 when he was reported missing. He would now be 30. The day after Balky Thompson was reported missing, a shed fire was reported at that location. The property is about 5 miles north of Carroll and is in the vicinity of where law enforcement was seen digging on Wednesday. Recovered from the shed fire in 2020 was thought to be debris of a vehicle owned by Balky Thompson. Further information about the incident is being withheld until an investigation is complete. Anyone with information regarding the disappearance of Balky Thompson is asked to contact the Missing Persons Information Clearinghouse, Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation at 515-725-6036. So that was some weeks ago, if not months ago, that this search happened. And just so you know, so as to kind of follow up and see if anything came of this, I did reach out to Christian's mother, who was the guest, and she got back to me saying that at least to this point, nothing has turned up. I think it makes all the sense in the world to look at on that property. But on the other hand, I have to be open to the idea that it sounded to me like she drove his vehicle to that property and she was by herself. That's kind of the way, when thinking about his disappearance, at least the way I remember it, I always had envisioned that she shows up with this car and tells this guy, I got to get rid of this car. Here's what's going on. And so Christian wouldn't have been with her, which means probably if he is deceased, he's not on that property. That's kind of the way my mind was working for his disappearance. But still, if they're going to have access to the property, they should dig out every square foot of it, as far as I'm concerned, even though I personally may have a different idea of what really happened in this disappearance. But so far, nothing of any note came from that search. Next update, Paul Sanders. Paul David Sanders was a 17-year-old from Mesa, Arizona. He was originally from Missouri and very athletic. On August 14th, 2001, the person may or may not have been Paul, driving Paul's truck, was pulled over by law enforcement in Tucson. A chase ensued in which the driver escaped. The truck was later found wrecked several miles away with no signs of Paul. He was never seen again. The update here is that the work continues. It's kind of the same update, maybe from the last couple of these update episodes going back to last year, 2023, in which one of my assistants, Carrie, of course you heard from Carrie a couple months ago when I interviewed her in a special episode. Of course, I interviewed all of my assistants back then, Eric, Cherie, and Emily as well. But you got to hear from Carrie, and I think we did talk about Paul at least a little bit in that discussion, and I greatly respect Carrie's work. Probably, if you don't know by now, I respect anybody's work who can keep things very grounded, very logical, and being able to keep the sensationalism out of the analysis. That's kind of who, of course, probably know, that's who I am, and so those are the kinds of people that I like to work with, although certainly there have been people whose work I respect that can sometimes get into sensational areas. But Carrie is working on this along with a longtime listener. Her name is Jill, who's also a member of the think tank, and once again, I greatly respect her work as well. Both have gotten to know Jill very well, respect her certainly as a person and the work that she does. And so when both of them say that they're pretty sure, not 100%, but pretty sure that the person in Paul's truck was not Paul, I really have to take that seriously. Not something I would have suspected or predicted or anything. In fact, going back to when Unfound covered his disappearance, I was certainly under the impression that Paul was driving his truck. But so many things have been revealed. Even something as simple as the chase that allegedly happened. That chase did not go as police described it at the time in the story that's been told over the last 20 plus years. There's now paperwork to show that that is not exactly what happened. There was kind of a chase, and allegedly it got stopped because they ran into a rainstorm in Phoenix, which you might expect. Rainstorms there are somewhat rare. It's like having a rainstorm in Las Vegas, where I lived for 13 and a half years, maybe once a year or something. Well, that rainstorm probably didn't exist. And both Jill and Carrie have had problems dealing with multiple jurisdictions. Some have been very helpful, some of them not so helpful in trying to piece this all together. But one thing they keep coming back to is that Paul was probably not driving that truck. But like I said, the work continues, and I can't get into why they suspect he wasn't driving the truck. We're just going to leave it at that for now. And, of course, they've been doing, they did their own podcast. I don't know when the next episode's going to come out. They started, I think, last year, did a couple episodes. I don't know if they've done anything since, but maybe if they get back into that, they will reveal more of what they've discovered. Totally up to them. It's their show. They can do whatever they want. I am really just a bystander at this point. Next update, the Pickering Six. Jay Boyle, Michael Cummins, Daniel Higgins, Jamie Lafebvre, Robbie Rumbolt, and Chad Smith were 6 teenagers from Pickering, Ontario, Canada. In the early morning hours of March 18th, 1995, the group was at a party. They then were headed to a marina to goof around. The video caught 3 of them there minutes later. All of them were never seen again. Now, the update, as I foreshadowed earlier in this episode, is that the guest for that episode has very, very sadly died. And, of course, his name was Bruce Ricketts. And he had been working on their disappearances for quite a while. Seemed like a fantastic guy, certainly a little bit of a character, I think Bruce was. And this was originally a disappearance, coincidentally, just talking about her in the previous update with Paul Sanders. Jill was the one who had said, Ed, you might think about covering the Pickering Six. Of course, I'm the one that came up with that name, but the disappearances of these men who seemingly disappeared up there in Canada, altogether seemingly went out on a boat on one of the Great Lakes and disappeared. And I can remember the first time, and of course when Jill, like I said, greatly respect her, when she says, Ed, you should look at this disappearance, I take it very seriously. And so I did, and ended up talking to Bruce. And it's one of those weird times where I remember the very, very first time I spoke to a guest. You have to imagine at this point, a lot of these conversations unfortunately run together, although the disappearances themselves are all very classified in my mind. All the conversations I've had with guests, after what, it's been 300 some now. But for some reason, I remember Bruce's first conversation, maybe because I remember it was in my car. It was the summer of 2022, and I was driving to Illinois for the PDGA Masters World Disc Golf Tournament. Remember, I went up there, Peoria, Illinois, stayed with my college, one of my best friends from college, Dave, and hung out with him for a while. And that was that trip. And I called him right when I was still in Florida. It was on my agenda. I said, I'm going to talk to this Bruce Ricketts guy while I'm in my car. And that's what I did. And, of course, he eventually, a couple months later, appeared on Unfound. But he passed away. And even though this is kind of like what I say about John Paulus, of course, John Paulus is still alive, greatly respect their work. But in both cases, the way I look at their respective disappearances is different than what they think. Certainly Bruce was thinking along the lines that something of a foul play nature went on with these 6 young men. I am not as convinced of that. Of course, as you know, I don't hold that against anybody. Many of the guests and families, they think something happened. I think something different. It never affects whether I'm going to try to help them or not. Ever. Never affects that. And so even if Bruce had continued to live and we continued to talk about these 6 young men, we might have our differences, but certainly I would try to help him in whatever he wanted to do. My idea is that, as best as I can tell, because we were friends on Facebook, he never talked about any health issues or anything. So my perception is this was something that happened quite suddenly, and this happened actually on January 2nd of this year, 2024. I think one of his children posted something about it, that he had passed away, on his Facebook page. And this is a great loss. All of these guys, every one of them, like I said, it hurts every time. And the first thing I start wondering about, and even dare I say worrying about, is who is going to pick up the baton and keep moving it forward regarding all of these disappearances, even though I may think that one thing happened and the guest who is now deceased thought something different. I still worry about, is somebody going to pick up the baton and keep moving this forward, trying to really figure out what happened. Right now, I don't know if that's going to happen with these young men. I know maybe 1 or 2 of members of their family are out there, but really it was Bruce who kind of put it all together and would represent all of their disappearances, which I think is very important. I think that kind of keeps things simpler, in contrast to 6 different families doing their own media appearances and possibly saying different things about the facts of that night and everything. I think when you can get one person who is a good person like Bruce was, and very organized and well-spoken, and it's kind of, I think, delved into this kind of mysteries like these before, it's very helpful. So I don't know who that's going to be. I hope somebody can take Bruce's place. But it's very sad. So this is the updates. Bruce Ricketts no longer with us, and I hope he rests in peace. Next update, Natasha and Susan Carter. Natasha Alex Carter and Susan Carter were a daughter and mother, respectively, from Beckley, West Virginia. Susan had another older daughter, and Natasha was 10 years old. Sometime in February 2000, Susan's husband of 3 years claimed Susan and Natasha left with a man named Jose or Manuel. They were never seen again. This is big news. And Larry Webb, who ended up being Susan Carter's next husband, has been charged with at least Natasha's death. And so I'm going to read this article to you. This is just very, very recently. Now, granted, last year, I think probably in one of the update episodes, I talked about how he'd been questioned, been interviewed, that the local authorities and maybe the FBI were looking into all of this again. Well, this has finally gotten around to now. Larry Webb is in custody. You can imagine he's a very old guy. There's like a picture of him out there, and it even maybe looks like he's actually in a hospital bed or something. But they actually now have access to his property with warrants, and now they can do anything I guess they want on that property, searching around, digging, maybe tearing down walls. I don't know. But here's the article. An arrest has been made in relation to the disappearance of Alex Carter. If you remember, there was Natasha, but her father called her Alex. Between April 10th and April 11th of 2024, so just within this past week, I'm doing this recording on April 17th of 2024. West Virginia State Police, the FBI, and U.S. Marshals excavated a backyard in the Beckley-Mabscott area. Larry Webb was indicted for the first-degree murder of Natasha Alex Carter in October of 2023. Raleigh County Prosecuting Attorney Ben Hatfield confirmed to 59 News that after an extremely difficult and long battle, Larry Webb was taken into custody on Friday, April 12th. It's like I said, less than a week ago. Webb's health and age made it difficult for the arrest to be made. Webb is being held without bond. This is one of those, I don't think this is much of a surprise. Now, maybe there is still a lot of questions on what exactly went on here and why isn't Susan also mentioned in the charges, surely. But I'm not sure that many people really believed that Susan and Natasha went off with a couple guys, especially considering that Larry couldn't get their names right. He would say one name one time and then another name the next. And this is a situation where Natasha / Alex's father, and to remind you all of him, his name was Rick Lafferty, and he's actually posted a few things. And in fact, Rick's other daughter has also been messaging me, and if she's out there, I appreciate her keeping me posted, just sending a couple messages, even though I've not had any long conversation with her like I did with Rick for the episode. They are on the property, digging around, and like I said, I'm not sure anybody is really surprised by these developments. Maybe it's just a matter of why did it take this long? And this is something that I've brought up on the live show that I do on YouTube. You're watching the live show, right? Or on these update episodes, is what changes? To my knowledge, no facts regarding the disappearances of Natasha and Susan have changed since 2000, to my knowledge. So what is it about the year 2023 or the years 2023 into 2024 that make anything different? Could they not have done this back in 2000 or 2001? Now, of course, if facts change, somebody comes forward, says something, and then they look into it, and it turns out to be factual. I don't know what we can imagine for these particular disappearances. Then we get it. Well, as facts change, theories change. And as new facts come to light, that makes it maybe more likely that somebody's going to be charged with something, or a disappearance. Maybe there's nobody to charge. A disappearance is going to come to its end. They're going to resolve it. They find remains in the woods, and there's no signs of foul play. By this time, we all know how that works. the big question I have is, well, what changed? There's nothing that I've read or heard anywhere, including from Rick himself, that anything is different now than it was back then, almost 25 years ago. And maybe I can see, well, maybe Susan did run off and took her daughter with some guy, and Larry's getting the name wrong, and maybe he just was so ticked off he didn't even want to know the guy or the men's names or something. Happens. Women and men do run off with other people. But you would have thought maybe within a year, a couple years, everybody involved, including law enforcement, would have seen the writing on the wall. It's clear to me that Rick Lafferty saw the writing on the wall as soon as he found out about all this. What is now being turned up now in these charges is something, of course, that Rick has thought for 20 years. I guess, unfortunately, I don't think it's necessarily his fault. Law enforcement just couldn't be convinced, I guess, until recently. What's changed? I don't know. There very well could be some sort of information that's not yet public that really changed everything. But I think I've also learned sometimes that that's not the case. It's just finally somebody decides to do something. What's the saying? I forget who. I think maybe it was a comedian or one of these. It's been around. 80% of life is showing up, and what that means is that if you want to keep your job, 80% of keeping that job is just showing up on time every day. And so when it comes to disappearances, sometimes all it takes is to somebody to care and start doing something. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes or Columbo investigative abilities. It just takes somebody to show up one day at his or her job and say, you know what? I'm going to take a look at this disappearance. Sometimes that's all it takes. And maybe that's what happened here. If I hear otherwise, I will, of course, certainly tell all of you. As for what I think went on here, as I talked about in the live show this past Monday, my best insight into this is that Larry was a lot older than Susan. You heard how Rick talked about Susan in the interview. He was as, barely PG as he could keep it regarding her and how she looked and how she acted and everything. And I'm inclined to believe that Susan was a bit of a gold digger. She saw this older guy that took an interest in her, and he worked, even though it wasn't some glamorous job, he worked for the post office, but those people make decent money and have great pensions. She's thinking, oh, I found this kind of sugar daddy. He's an older guy by himself. This younger woman's interested in him. Wow, this is fantastic. And then they get married, and then reality sets in. And things go bad. And abuse starts. And one day, Larry does something to Susan. And because Natasha was a witness to it or was old enough to figure out what happened, she had to be killed as well. That's my theory. That's the best I got at this time. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Very sad. Very, very sad. I just don't know why Susan isn't mentioned in any of these charges yet. And we also have to remember something that maybe is forgotten in this disappearance, that Susan's other daughter, not by Rick, but by some other guy, ended up moving in with Larry Webb after this all happened. Remember that? Yeah, this is I don't like to put superlatives on disappearances, but some of the tangential facts to this disappearance certainly are some of the crazier ones I think that we've heard over the past 7.5 years. So Larry Webb charged. They're digging in the yard. I don't know if they're going to find anything. We have to remember this 20-some years ago, so it very well could be that if he went and dug a hole, put them in it, covered it over, and put grass on top, it could look like the rest of the yard by this point. So they might have to go through every square foot of it before they find anything. Unlike maybe with Carlos Rodriguez, where the cement slab, concrete slab there was there for everybody to see. Next update, and any of you who maybe are like keeping track, seeing how we're progressing through Unfound's history, knew that this one was coming up soon because it made, of course, national news, and it has been so prominent out there, and that is Keith Call and Sandra Haley. Richard Keith Call and Cassandra Lee Haley were a 20-year-old and 18-year-old from Gloucester. I always get that name wrong. Gloucester and Grafton, Virginia, respectively. They had a college class together on April 9th, 1988. So we've just passed, 36 years. Keith and Sandra were on their first date. Keith and Sandra went to a party in Newport News, then left some time after midnight. Keith's car was found just hours later on the Colonial Parkway. They were never seen again. I think many of you, maybe not all of you, it depends on how in tune you are with all of this. Somebody has been, although not with, and I'm going to get into this, but not with Keith and Sandra, but with two of the other victims who are considered to be part of the Colonial Parkway, let's just say crime spree or death spree. And I'm going to read this article to you right now. A dead fisherman has been identified as the suspect in 3 cold case homicides in Virginia from the 1980s. I'm going to have to clarify that a little bit, including 2 of the notorious Colonial Parkway murders that once stoked fears in the area. Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. Now, there is a junior who's still alive, and I've looked up his criminal record. He's no treat. But we're talking about Wilmer Sr., who is deceased, was identified by forensic evidence in the 1987 double murder of David L. Knobling, 20 years old, and Robin M. Edwards, 14 years old, in Isle of Wight County. Alan Wade Wilmer has also been connected to the 1989 murder through DNA of Teresa Lean Spa Howell, 29, in the city of Hampton, Virginia. Wilmer died in December of 2017 at his Lancaster County, Virginia home at the age of 63. They don't have any cause of death here. Prosecutors for Isle of Wight County and the city of Hampton said that if Wilmer were alive, charges would be filed against him in connection with the 3 deaths. In a news conference Monday, Virginia State Police said a new look at the case has led the Virginia Department of Forensic Science to positively link Wilmer to the 3 slayings after he was found to be a genetic match to evidence found on the victims. Knobling and Edwards were last seen alive on September 19th, 1987. So they were actually murdered before Keith and Sandra went missing, and they went missing in 1988. The following day, Knobling's pickup truck was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Ragged Island Wildlife Management Area. The keys were in the ignition, the radio and windshield wipers were still on. On September 23rd, 1987, their bodies were found along the shoreline of Ragged Island. They had been shot, and Edwards had been sexually assaulted. Now, I will admit, and if I missed this, I apologize. Maybe some of you knew this. It had been public, and I just don't remember me knowing this. I don't think it came up during Unfound's coverage. I don't remember knowing that Robin Edwards had been sexually assaulted. And I think that's significant. It's a significant fact. I think that would help anybody's analysis if you were to know something like this. Was this public, wasn't it? I just don't remember knowing that. She shared a statement, for 36 years, our families have lived in a vacuum of the unknown. We have lived in the fear of worrying that a person capable of deliberately killing Robin and David could attack and kill another victim. Now we have a sense of relief and justice, knowing that he can no longer victimize another. His death would not allow us to seek his death will not allow us to seek out the answer to countless questions that have haunted us for so long. Their deaths were one of 4 double slayings known as the Colonial Parkway murders that occurred near or along the area from 1986 to 1989. However, Geller said that while the similarities in the series of double homicides that spanned a 3-year period cannot be ignored, at the time there's no forensic or physical evidence to link the Olive White homicides to those other double murders. It's very important to remember. The other case Wilmer was deemed a suspect in is the death of Teresa Lynn Spa. How that is not a murder that was mentioned during Unfound's coverage from late in 2022. And they go into some details about her murder and everything. And so the article continues. So as you can imagine, since then, and it makes all the sense in the world, even though I may not at this point buy into it, makes all the sense in the world that now people are thinking, well, this Wilmer guy, you know, there seems to be I guess a pretty good chance maybe that he really did kill all of these people and did cause the disappearances of Keith and Sandra. For me at this point, that is just a step too far. And in fact, you know, in going back to that double episode that was pretty long, I made the case that I think all of these crimes are separate and were committed by different people. I think the mistake people were making is they're saying, well, this Wilmer guy, this was just two people that he randomly picked out. He just picked out Robin and David randomly. We don't know that. That's not been established. I don't know if that's factual. It very well may be that he did know David or his family somehow. Or he did know Robin somehow, or knew her family, or knew somebody connected to her. This, I think, has to be something that is determined to really know whether this was random or not. Because once again, as I stated back, I've stated, I think in the episode, and certainly before and since, that I have to start figuring out what are the odds that a guy, David Knobling, would be out with an underage girl, a 14-year-old, and them being together doesn't have anything to do with them being murdered. Remember, David was in a relationship with a actual adult woman. She was pregnant. Robin, snuck out of her house, or sneaked out of her house to be with David that night. And I made the claim that maybe somebody should be looking somebody connected to David or Robin who might have done this. Was upset. We can look at it from both ways. David's cheating on his girlfriend, pregnant girlfriend. Family finds out about it, goes there, tracks him down, tracks Robin down, kills them both. We have to remember this was execution style, which usually means it's somewhat personal, usually. Doesn't necessarily have to mean it has to do with romantic relationship, but it could have, of course, to do with business as well, when we think about the mob. So, I don't know at this point if this was actually random. First point. Second point is that what has come out of all of this is that, well, you know what? This Wilmer guy, at one point, he was suspected maybe in causing Keith and Sandra's disappearances. Well, here's what I know. I read the book and covered their disappearances and these murders as thoroughly as anybody has done. Wilmer's name is not mentioned anywhere. It's not. Now, it may have been known to police or something, but I start wondering, at this point, are we doing some sort of revisionist history? That, remember, David and Robin were murdered first. And now people are saying, well, you know what? I think that Wilmer guy was somehow, they were looking at him for the disappearances too. Well, could it be that the reason that they were looking at Wilmer for the disappearances, not because of any actual factual information, but it very well could be, and this happens, going back, of course, right back to Natasha and Susan Carter, where everybody kind of suspects something, but nothing is done. Could it be that back in 1987, during the investigation of David and Robin's murders, that Wilmer's name came up? And remember, these are the days before DNA, so they couldn't have scientifically connected him at the time. And did his name pop up during that investigation? And then when Sandra and Keith go missing the very next year, some police start thinking, well, maybe the same guy did it. Well, that's not factual. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. So I have to admit I'm dubious of this, to really believe that was Wilmer really, really, really investigated into the disappearances of Keith and Sandra, or did his name just happen to pop up because police kind of suspected that he had killed David and Robin before? Thus, he's going to be somebody that they're going to look into. They don't have enough information to charge him with anything in 1980s terms, but well, we'll have to maybe start looking at him. Could he have been around the Colonial Parkway that night? Was he in the area where this party was? On and on and on. And it doesn't seem like they could ever establish any of that. So sometimes, I guess what I'm saying is sometimes legend becomes fact. Especially when we get to disappearances that are 30-some years old or murders that are 30-some years old. And people start telling themselves stories. I can understand the need for all of these murders and the disappearances to be resolved. I can understand that. Maybe it's not as much as the families, but as a person out here in the public disconnected from this, I can understand that as well as anybody. But I'm also saying that still we have to go through this in a very logical manner and really, really try to figure out, well, did they really, really suspect Wilmer of Keith and Sandra's disappearances back then? Or was that just an idea that was thrown around, the coffee machine at the police department at the time? I've read, he had a vehicle. I've read some of these statements that have come up since. It's not very convincing to me. Of course, some of you who have talked with privately know what I think happened. And statistically, my theory is much more likely than thinking that Wilmer did this. And then we have to start thinking about how did he, how do I want to put this? Did Keith and Sandra really go up to the Colonial Parkway that night then? Is that what we're saying? And they were doing stuff and he came along. Well, why didn't... We know by this time when it comes to killers, most of the time they stick to a modus operandi. Why? Because they get away with it. When you feel like killing people and you want to get away with it, which most people do, you pick ways in which you think you're going to get away with it. And so if we're to believe, because once we start thinking that maybe Wilmer did cause Keith and Sandra's disappearances, we have to maybe think he did all of it. But all of the modus operandi are different, and then that starts to get me thinking, well, he got away with the killing of the two women the year before, 1986. He didn't. Those women were not shot. They were slashed to death, and then their car was lit on fire. Somebody or people tried to push it into the river. That didn't work, so they set it on fire. And then the very next year, it's a totally different situation where David and Robin are shot execution style, and the truck is just sitting there for everybody to see. And then the next year, it's a young couple who go missing, and of course, their bodies have not been found to this day. There's no signs of violence. Their car is just sitting there on the road for everybody to see. And so that is a totally different type of modus operandi. And then, of course, we get to the two other people, young man and woman, who are connected, at least by name, with the Colonial Parkway murders, even though I think I've demonstrated that name doesn't make any sense. that modus operandi for them is also something totally, totally different than the other 3 incidents. It's hard to understand. Did really Wilmer do all of this and they're all so different? It seems very, very unlikely. All we know is that he killed David and Robin. And that's all, and this other woman. That's all we know at this point. Everything else is conjecture. People may be seeing things for what they want to see. A lot of emotions involved. And so that's where I stand on this. But I don't. This is one of those things. Do you ever think it's going to get solved? Well, I guess 2 of these murders, at least connected to the quote-unquote Colonial Parkway murders, are now solved. I'm still not convinced, though, that it was random. So there you go. That's the update. Next update, Maura Murray. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old from Hanson, Massachusetts. She was a college student majoring in nursing on the evening of February 9th, 2004. So we just passed the 20-year mark. Wow. For some reason, Maura was in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and wrecked her car. When police showed up, Maura wasn't at the accident scene. She was never seen again. The update here is just something that caught my ear while listening to the podcast that Maura's sister started called Media Pressure, and I think that we can certainly understand why she called it that, given everything that's gone on over the last 20 years and how much the Maura family has been harassed by certain people in the media, and the media getting it wrong. And it's the very reason that Julie was on Unfound to talk about Maura and her disappearance in Julie's own words. That's what we do here. But something caught my ear, or it caught somebody else's ear, I should say, correction. It caught somebody else's ear, and the person brought it to me, and I was like, man, that was fantastic. The person who caught this, and what was the reason it was fantastic was because once this person, a listener of Unfound, messaged me and said, hey, did you, and I'm going to say what it is in here in a moment. What I did was I went out and like I do, I went to Web Sleuths and just Googled this particular piece of information. And it seems that nobody else caught this during that particular episode of Julie's podcast. That this particular person did, asked me if I had ever heard about it. I said, no, I hadn't. She surely did not mention it when I interviewed her. And it's kind of now out there, but it's amazing to me how, and I have to admit this probably happens with Unfound episodes as well, is that people listen to it and a fact goes by that's maybe new or unique in some way, and a few people catch it and a lot of people don't. And this is a very good example of this because it's fairly noteworthy. I don't know where it's going to go. I think that people know that I don't suspect any foul play in Maura's disappearance. That's what I think. You think something different, totally fine. But here's what it was. And it was not in the first, I think it might have been in the third episode, I don't have it in my notes here, of the podcast that Julie did. I think that podcast, is it complete now? But something that came up that she mentioned that, like I said, I don't think that anybody in the Murray family has ever said this before. And even those people who have gone to great lengths to cover Maura's disappearance, I don't think, whether they be kooks or not, have ever made this public, or I don't think they knew it at all either, is that when people finally did go and started looking through Maura's stuff that was still at the college, remember there was boxes and things, and of course some people defined this as being, well, she was getting ready to move out or something. Julie, of course, said otherwise. But there was a picture found. And it was a picture of a guy, I think from the military academy where Maura used to go. Pretty sure. And this guy was not the boyfriend that she had at the time. Well, they found, and this is something that I think has been known since like 2004, 2005, but it's just being, I think, released by Julie now. Now, whether she did this knowing that it was not released before, I'm not sure, but I did ask her about it. I'll get into that. But what happened was that there was this picture. It was obviously taken at the University of Massachusetts. Very obvious. I've not seen the picture. I don't even know if the picture's out there. But the guy in the picture with Maura was known. And at the time, at least, he had been fairly forthcoming and saying, oh, Maura, I just don't know what happened and everything. Well, he finally got asked about this picture with Maura and why he was asked about it or when it was taken or something like that. But he had stated previously that he had never been to the University of Massachusetts to see Maura. But there was this picture showing that he had been there. Now you can realize why this is going to get anybody's attention, no matter what theory you may have regarding Maura's disappearance. When some guy says he was never to the University of Massachusetts, and then a picture is found certainly showing him there with Maura, could be significant. Well, according to Julie, is when he was finally asked about this, well, he just decided he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He didn't want to correspond with Julie or anybody else regarding Maura's disappearance anymore. Now, certainly could be something. And I say this even though I don't think there was any foul play, any conspiracy or anything regarding Maura's disappearance. But even I can admit, well, this is something certainly that is worth pursuing. But this was established years ago, and obviously nothing's come of it. That doesn't mean something won't come of it eventually. We just don't know. But we have to throw around reasons why he might act like this. Well, the first thing, other than maybe he was covering up that he did know about Maura's disappearance for some reason. Other than that, what are some other viable reasons that he might act like that? He's all talkative. When he's shown this picture, he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it very well may be that he was involved with another woman at the time. And in fact, maybe here in 2024, he's married to that woman. And he doesn't want her to know that way back when, in their college days, that maybe he had sneaked or snuck away from his military academy or wherever he was to go see Maura, and they were having some sort of, they had some sort of one-night stand or something. I think that's a very viable possibility. And even though I'm not married, and 99.999% probably never will be, of course, I can't relate to this, but my understanding regarding marriages is this happens quite a bit, where two people end up getting married, but it very well may be one of them finds out somewhere down the road that when they were just dating, that the man or woman actually had been seeing somebody else. And in fact, I will tell you, even within my own circle of friends, I knew of a woman very well in Las Vegas who ended up getting married to a guy. And there were two other guys that were kind of still in her romance circle at the time she got proposed to by this particular guy. So to me, this doesn't sound crazy. So maybe that's why my mind automatically goes to, well, this guy wants to shut up because he doesn't want his current wife now to know that, yeah, there was that time. And it kind of goes back to, if you're a Friends fan, if you're old enough to remember the show Friends, with Ross and Rachel, well, we were on a break type of situation. This is what first comes to my mind that goes in a direction opposite of thinking this guy knows anything about the disappearance. Now, you may come up with some other reasons. I'm not going to do a list, but this is what comes to mind to me. All we know is He claimed that he would never had gone to the University of Massachusetts, was ever on the campus or ever saw Maura there. A picture proved otherwise, and then he didn't want to talk to Julie anymore. Now, like I said, I did ask Julie about this, and because I had to. That's my job, and I realize it's one of those things. I realize I have to ask the questions, but I also realize these people don't have to give me answers. And I'll just leave it at this. She really didn't want to say much. That this was something that was known for a long time, but she did not get into any follow-ups that the police maybe went and when they found out that maybe his stories didn't line up what the police had to say or anything like that. Just I don't have any information in that area at all. And even Julie herself, at least to me, did not offer up any insight into what she thinks about it. But I did ask her. She said that's, in fact, right now at this second, I'll just find the email and read it. Because like I said, she won't mind it because it really doesn't say much. But just so I get it word for word. Here's what she said. The info about, I'm not mentioning his name, is relatively new within the last 2 years, but brand new to the public. And she says, I can't share as much as I've provided the picture to the investigators. That's all she's really said. I'll just leave it at that. Like I said, I don't think she'll mind me reading that. But it's relatively new information, but brand new to the public. Like I said, I'm a little disappointed she didn't mention it. Of course, from a personal point of view, that she didn't mention it when I interviewed her. That's the way it goes sometimes. So there you go. That is the update. And if you missed that, if you've listened to Julie's podcast, maybe you should go back and track that down so you can hear her talk about it for herself. Next update, Christopher Douthit. Christopher Ray Douthit was a 24-year-old from Roanoke, Virginia. He was a roofer and father of twins. On October 25th, coincidentally, once again, my mother's birthday. That's the second time I think her date, October 25th, has been mentioned in this update episode. Very strange. On October 25th, 2013, Christopher was due to meet a female friend at a grocery store at 5 p.m. In fact, he called her to say he was already there. However, when she arrived, Christopher could not be found. He was never seen again. The update here is that his family has decided to declare him deceased. And I'll read it, the article. From Franklin County, Virginia. Franklin County man missing since 2013 has been declared dead by a Franklin County Circuit Court. Christopher Douthit was last reported seen alive in October 2013 when he cashed a check after working in Vinton and then headed on foot toward the food line on Bennington in Roanoke to meet a friend, and he is missing ever since. Having not officially seen or heard from him in more than 10 years, along with other criteria, the court says standards have been met for presumption of death. Surprised. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily think he is alive. But we could say that about most of Unfound's disappearances. Have we been surprised? Certainly. Christopher Patrick Reed, if you'll remember. I think a lot of people thought he was dead. He ended up turning up alive. Brandon Roberts from Oregon. I think most people thought he was dead. I certainly did. He's not dead. In fact, he's alive right now. But for the most part, I think when we start thinking these people are dead, I think most of the time we're right. But you should know, at least as far as I've been able to tell, that very, very few of Unfound's missing people have been declared deceased. And in fact, I will tell you, I've told some guests, you don't want to do that. Because as soon as we all know, the police are looking for all the reasons in the world to not investigate these disappearances. They're looking for all the reasons in the world. And when you do that, you're basically just telling them, you can stop looking now. That's what happens. You know, you don't have to even have it on your conscience anymore. And because it's hard to, on one hand, as a family, whoever's connected to whoever's making this decision, say, yeah, we want to declare him deceased, and on the other hand say, well, we really want you to continue to look for him. I don't see that as a paradox or as a conflict, but police will because they want it to be. You never give them any reason to stop looking. Now, what's going on here? I don't know. I don't know. But we have just as a compare and contrast, a disappearance that I know very, very well and has a lot of facts concerning it is Dorianne Myers. She was eventually declared deceased. Now, are there reasons to believe that she is deceased with her disappearance? Absolutely. Burned house, dead pets, car burned several miles away. Suspicious characters, let's just leave it at that. Certainly reasons to think that. But in that case, the reason she was declared deceased is because she had possessions. There was this house. What are you going to do? She's missing. She's the only person who lives in the house. She owns it. What do you want to do with it? So eventually, after a particular amount of time, when she didn't reappear, it makes sense. Her son, who I've actually spoken to a couple times over the last couple of years, these things could then be moved forward. When you declare deceased, all these other things can then be released, and the property can be taken care of and everything else. Whereas my impression is that Christopher was not in this same situation. I don't know if he owned a house. He had kids, and maybe there was something there that was all tied up, but certainly it doesn't say it in any of the paperwork that I saw. Maybe in the court, if I really, really wanted to dig into these court records, I could do that and find out exactly what's going on. But it's still, we've had many missing people who had children who aren't declared deceased. And I guess I can even say that in some of those, there very well may be even a question whether these people are deceased. We might be even open to that idea, that there's not an obvious, there's no facts to support the idea that these people are deceased. And in fact, there's nobody saying anything to believe that these people are deceased. In contrast to these wives who go missing and their guys, their men, their husbands say, well, I just don't know what happened to her. Well, that's something different. So Christopher Douthit, declared deceased. It's been 10 years. And it's just a surprise, but that's the update. And I don't think there was any foul play, but I know that disappearance well enough now to know that there are people who do believe that it was foul play, that he did get picked up. He was there. He was walking to the food line or whatever, and he got picked up by somebody. I am not inclined to think that, but I'm not sure there are any facts to point in any particular direction. Next update, Irene Gaca. Irene Wairimu Gaca was a 32-year-old from Gillette, Wyoming. She was originally from Kenya and had a large family. On February 24th, 2022, so one of the newest disappearances Unfound has ever covered, Irene's boyfriend, Nathan, claimed she left him by putting clothes in a couple plastic bags and getting into a vehicle with someone. She was never seen again. This is a disappearance that was featured on the Paramount Plus show. I think that's the first time I had ever heard about it. And then eventually, of course, I did the interviews for Irene's disappearance. So the update is that there's now I guess you'd call it a reinvestigation. Even though this disappearance is only over a couple years old, it's already being reinvestigated, which should tell you something. It's been 2 years since a nursing student from Kenya disappeared from her home in Gillette, and a neighboring law enforcement agency has opened a new and unrelated investigation into her live-in boyfriend. Irene Gaca, now 34, vanished from the home in Gillette that she shared with Nathan Heitman in late February 2022. Heitman, 40, is now serving a 3 to 6 year sentence in Wyoming State Prison after pleading guilty last fall, this would be in 2023, to 3 felonies related to financial and intellectual property crimes against her. Among those crimes include draining Gaca's bank account after she disappeared and maxing out her credit cards with more than 80 purchases totaling nearly $7,000, including a shovel, pair of boots, and pants from Walmart for $36.19. Those things were probably specifically noted in this article because they look suspicious. A new investigation opened by the Torrington Police Department. Isn't Torrington also where Renee Yergain went missing, I think? In November stems from the period in which Heitman had been incarcerated at the Wyoming Medium Correctional Facility there, where he's been since being transferred from the Campbell County Detention Center in late June 2023. Heitman claimed that he had been harassed or something happened due to an unknown incident. He was moved to the maximum security Wyoming State Penitentiary in Rawlins, where he is now. It's not clear if the open investigation had anything to do with his transfer. And so where's Irene? It's a pretty long article, but they are reinvestigating it. And Heitman's story maintains his innocence, according to court documents, and denies having anything to do with the disappearance. He contains that Gaca left their residence late one evening in late February. He told police that Gaca came from dinner and said she was leaving before getting into a dark-colored SUV with her belongings packed into 2 black plastic trash bags. Heitman said she didn't tell him where she was going, only that she was unhappy and was leaving Wyoming. And although Heitman admitted to police that he stole Gaca's money when first interviewed, court documents state he said he did so as a means of coercing her into contacting him after she left. So I don't think this investigation was closed. I don't know if anybody, even police, even though we know how often they do believe these kinds of stories, I'm not even sure police believe this Heitman guy's story about how Irene just took off. What's hard to understand is why it's being termed here a reinvestigation. Should at this point, 2 years in, just be an investigation without any RE at the beginning? You would think. Now, if this were a disappearance that's 20-some years old, then the word reinvestigation, I think, makes a lot of sense. But not for a disappearance that's only 2 years old, and I realize 2 years, horrible for Irene's family. When I use the word only, I'm using it in unfound terms, and to remind all of you, the average age of a disappearance we cover on this podcast is over 20 years old. So that's why the word only is used sometimes for these disappearances that are 2 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old. Don't get me wrong. I perfectly understand it's horrible for the family. It feels like 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. But this is all to just keep things in perspective and keep them as factual as possible. Where do I think this is going to go? Unless there are additional facts that have been popped up since the first investigation, I'm not too positive this is going to lead anywhere. I'm always hopeful, but these kinds of disappearances, at least at this point, this one feels like all of those that we know have gotten solved by luck, where somebody stumbles upon remains somewhere in the woods on the side of the road. We know about Daniel Villarreal, the guy helping his mother out. He goes back there, takes the door off the hinges of this shed or whatever it was, and there Daniel Villarreal was. Of course, luck. Irene's disappearance, at least at this point, feels like the only way it's going to get solved is through luck. It just doesn't seem there are any facts to point in any particular direction except to believe that this guy did something to her. Other than that, where he put her, I don't think there are any facts known to know either way. Next update, Ashley Higgins. And this will be the last update for any of the disappearances covered on the podcast that comes out every Friday. I will then go into some Unfound Now updates. Ashley Higgins, Ashley Standish Higgins, was a 19-year-old from Costa Mesa, California. She was a rebellious type, but was very close to her family. On or around November 6th, 1982, Ashley allegedly took a trip to Las Vegas with a female friend. The friend returned. Ashley did not. She was never seen again. And I think what was, I wouldn't say solidly established, but certainly put some of these facts, we certainly questioned some of the facts regarding Ashley's disappearances. Did Ashley really go to Las Vegas or not? I have to let you know I'm not convinced of that. I've convinced myself that her disappearance actually took place in California and even right there in Costa Mesa somewhere. That's me. Maybe you heard something different during that episode. But the update is that a few months ago, I was contacted by a young woman who has some true crime experience and has done a documentary into filmmaking, independent filmmaking, and has worked a little bit in true crime. And she had contacted me about, and I'll just admit it, even though this is going to go in a direction I don't know. I was just being honest with her. But she was interested in maybe doing a documentary about the 5 missing young men in San Francisco. And, of course, here at Unfound, we have featured 3 of them. That would be Sean Dickerson, Cameron Remmer, and Jackson Miller. The other 2 being Christian Hughes and Sean Seedy. And those are 2 disappearances that I would love to feature them as well, maybe even here in 2024. I have spoken to Christian's mother a few years ago. Maybe it's about time I get back in contact with her. However, I will admit, in trying to reach out to Sean Seedy's family, I've never gotten any response. 0. But she had contacted me because she knew that I had featured those 3 already and just was looking for information. She was thinking about doing this documentary, and she wanted my honest opinion on it. And when people, I'm usually a pretty honest guy. I wouldn't say blatantly honest or bluntly honest, but if you're going to ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. And I told her that you could do that, but my interpretation of knowing at least 4 of the families is that they certainly love the publicity. It's not that. They certainly love the publicity. And any story that is ever going to be done, whether nationally on a podcast or locally in San Francisco, as long as it's factually correct, they'll support that. The issue is that combining all 5, this kind of gives me the feeling like going back to the Colonial Parkway murders. Really, there is no reason to connect all of them. They're certainly all very tragic. And certainly crimes were committed. Murders were committed. But from a factual point of view, if you're really looking to do investigation, as already stated in this episode, and I stated in the original in the original episodes for the Colonial Parkway murders, really, factually, there's no reason to connect them. The only reason they got connected is it was convenient for reporting purposes. My insight would be is that is only served to cloud the entire issue of all of those incidents. I will say that. So when I think about these 5 young men who went missing in San Francisco, we have to remember that none of them knew each other. Yes, they were all young, quote-unquote young. Of course, I'm 53. Somebody in their 40s is young these days. But they didn't know each other. I think, at least on Unfound, with the three that we featured, we established that none of the circumstances are similar. Cameron Remmer, Jackson Miller, and Sean Dickerson were three certainly different guys. I mean, Cameron wasn't from the area at all. Jackson Miller was from outside the area, although closer. Sean Dickerson did live in the area. They all different jobs, different personalities. There's really no reason to connect all of them, except to say that they were young and they all went missing in San Francisco over a period of 5 to 7 years. But other than that, not much similarity. And even with Christian Hues, and from what I know, and from what I understand about Sean Sidi's disappearance, S-I-D-I, by the way, is his last name, same thing. None of these guys knew each other. Really not similar guys in any particular way. The circumstances of all five are very unique. And so what I told her is that you have to be very careful when you start combining things. Because then that kind of subconsciously, you're telling the audience, well, they are connected. You can do all that you want saying they aren't connected. But if you combine them into a film or a book or a podcast, you are just subconsciously telling the audience they are connected, no matter what you actually say otherwise. And I told her, I just don't think that's a good idea. And my impression of the families that I've gotten to know regarding these young men is that they would prefer that each of their disappearances was covered separately. And that it was out of convenience. They realize it. I realize it. It was out of convenience that the San Francisco media started putting them all together, because it makes for a great story. Maybe there's some serial killer, but any reporter who would take just a couple hours to really look at the facts of each of these disappearances would know there's no reason to think they're connected. Thus, they should be reported on separately. Because when you put them together, once again, no matter what you say, the readers, the listeners are going to think they are connected. And there is a serial killer, and there's something going on, and there's no proof of that. So what does this have to do with Ashley Higgins? Well, I guess I kind of talked her out of doing that for the reasons that I just gave. If anybody in any of those young men's families are listening, that's why I did it. But when I found out that this young woman was from Southern California, and in fact was from Orange County, which is where Costa Mesa is, Santa Ana, I've been in that area many, many times. I said, well, being that you live in the area, maybe you should think about Ashley's disappearance. And at that point, of course, Ashley's a very recent disappearance. It's very fresh in my mind. I've gotten to know her brother Andrew, who I think is a very fascinating guy. I think he did a fantastic interview when he appeared on Unfound. I said, well, maybe you'll want to think about this one. I just kind of gave, and I said, being that you're there, you live in the area, there's probably a lot of information that you can access locally that even today in 2024 we can't access on the internet. Maybe court records regarding any of these guys' names who came up during the episode. Unfortunately, the Orange County Register, which is the local newspaper there, especially back in 1982, is not as available online as other California newspapers are. You may need to go to actually where it's published, or go to the library and do microfiche, go back to 1982. You can do that if you live there. And so this is the argument that I made to her. Well, she ended up talking to Ashley's brother Andrew. And I haven't talked to her since. And so maybe something has gotten started there. And of course, it's also convenient that the woman who claimed that she did go to Las Vegas with Ashley, she lives in that area. Maybe this can all be turned into some sort of, I don't, can you make it into an hour-long documentary film or 90-minute documentary film? Maybe you can. I'm not a filmmaker anymore. I certainly turned it into an hour-and-a-half podcast, so I guess it's possible. So that is the update. There is a young woman out there with some filmmaking experience, true crime experience, that ended up through me talking to Andrew Higgins. So we'll see where it goes. And maybe I should email her to see for a follow-up, see what's going on, because it's been a few months ago now. So that's the update. And Ashley's is, if you ask me, do you think it's one of the more solvable ones in Unfound's catalog? I really don't know about that. What, though, I do think is that if there's any reason that has been unsolved for over 40 years, it's maybe because the facts haven't been correct. That's something we tried to establish in the episode. And it even maybe somebody can even do a better job if that person lives in the area, can go to these locations, really go and get records and go through them, sit at a desk somewhere and go through government records. And it's just working on Ashley's disappearance locally, in person. Maybe can take it to that next level. I think Unfound took it to one level. Maybe this young woman can take it to, an even better level. I'm hoping. So that's the update. All right, now we move on to the Unfound Now updates. And if you're wondering what that is, well, you should be going to the YouTube channel. This is a monthly series I do covering fairly recent disappearances. The standard for the podcast is that a disappearance has to be a year old before I will look at it. Whereas with the Unfound Now episodes, it's usually disappearances that are within a couple months of when I publish an episode. So the one that will be coming out here at the end of April will most likely be a disappearance that happened in February or March. Although there may be a little bit of an exception. The one at the end of March was actually a disappearance that went the whole way back to November, but I thought it was a good one to cover, give some publicity to, and I thank that listener who let me know about it. The first update is with these multiple murders. There were disappearances that turned into murders in Oklahoma, in Turley, Turley, Oklahoma. The Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, this would be for the disappearances and murders of Jack Grimes, Dwayne Selby, and Dwayne Selby's mother, Glenda Parton, like Dolly Parton. The Tulsa County Sheriff's Office held a news conference Wednesday afternoon to announce that they've arrested John B. Good. I'm not making that up. Johnny B. Good is his name. Not making that up. Good has been called a person of interest until now. Jack Grimes, Dwayne Selby disappeared on the way to a car show in Dallas in 2021. And then Selby's mother, Glenda Parton, vanished after she went looking for her son. That's all ringing a bell now, I suppose. The Oklahoma Medical Examiner released the cause of death for Jack Grimes, whose body was found in a field in Turley. The report said he had multiple gunshots to his head and neck and was dismembered and put into bags. The remains of Selby and his mother, Parton, were found last month. Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Regalado says Good was a homeless man who was living on the property with Grimes and Selby. 64-year-old Good was just convicted Tuesday for the 2022 murder of Richard Bonnet, so he has at least 4 people that he has murdered in his life. Investigators are still looking into the motives for the killings. TCSO, the sheriff's office, released a photo of a man shopping with Cookie the day she came to Tulsa to search for her son and Jack. They questioned and released him, but Fox 23 is told he was not ruled out as a suspect. However, Carol said she knows exactly who the man pictured shopping with her mother-in-law is. She told Fox 23 his name is John, and he works as the men's farmhand, taking care of horses and other ranch duties. But things would take a turn that night because Carol and Jack's sister Nancy would both report that when they last either saw or spoke with Cookie, she was left alone with John at the men's homes. Nancy said she last saw Cookie's car in the driveway at the men's home that night. She disappeared, and Carol said a family member also reported Cookie's car was in the driveway of the Turley Ranch before they went to bed. So this guy was seen with Glenda shortly before she went missing. Like it says, her body was eventually found, and her car was ditched, and just like the other men's car was ditched. And there's another guy here, though, that I kind of talked about in the original Unfound Now, though, that is not mentioned in any of this. So I'm not sure if Johnny B. Good had anything to do with his disappearance or murder or not. All they're connecting now are the people that were mentioned in this article. Like they said, they're unsure about a motive, but I suppose it could be anything at this point. Does he have some sort of mental illness? Did they catch him stealing, and so they wanted to fire him? Did he do it thinking that he could kill them and then take possession of everything? A lot of possibilities here. So we just don't know. All we know is pretty sure that he killed all of them. So it sounds eventually like he will be going to jail for this. Is there going to be a trial or anything? Too early to say. But when I ran across those, I can still remember when I ran across all of those, I guess it must have been in 2022, that, wow, this is certainly something going on here. And if I make a comparison to the Colonial Parkway murders, it was very obvious that all of these people were connected, that all of their murders or disappearances were connected, in contrast to the Colonial Parkway murders. This is how I think about things. People say Colonial Parkway murders are connected because of distance or whatever. Well, it was separated by a lot of miles, whereas these people were all within a couple miles and all knew each other. That's the way I look at things. You have to keep things in perspective. Next update, Dylan Rounds. And given the national attention his disappearance got, maybe some of you already know about this, but skeletal remains found in a remote part of western Utah are believed to belong to Dylan Rounds, a 19-year-old farmer who disappeared in 2022. Authorities announced Tuesday after the man charged in Rounds' death reportedly led authorities to the burial site. The human remains were discovered Tuesday in Lucin, a small railroad community located about 200 miles northwest of Salt Lake City. The FBI processed the area for evidence and recovered the remains, which are in the possession of the Utah Office of the Medical Examiner, to confirm the identity. Rounds was last seen on his farm in Lucin, reported missing on May 30th, 2022. In March 2023, so over a year ago, the sheriff's office announced that James Brenner was charged with aggravated murder and abuse or desecration of a human body for the murder of Rounds and the disposal of his body. Brenner led investigators to the location of Rounds' burial site Tuesday as part of a plea agreement. We thank everyone for their support and love. We're grateful we now have Dylan's body and can bring him home as we continue our fight for justice. According to a probable cause statement, Rounds' last signal to his phone was pinged to a pond not far from where Brenner was staying. Rounds' boots were found near a dirt mound, and his phone was discovered at the bottom of a pond. Rounds spoke with his grandmother on the phone before he disappeared, but that was the last time his family heard from him. The sheriff's office said Tuesday that it would not release any more information so as not to compromise the ongoing legal proceedings. Our hearts go out to the family of Dylan Rounds. We offer our sincerest condolences for the loss of their family member. We understand that the pain of their loss is immeasurable, and we want to express our deepest sympathies to them. It is our hope they can find peace moving forward. James Brenner, obviously a horrible, horrible, horrible person. But I will give him credit for this. At least he took him to the remains. We know how many killers don't. So I give him credit for that. I don't care if it was part of a plea deal. I'm guessing that the family was more than happy that the deal was reached, instead of having to live for years and years and years wondering where Dylan was. So I give James credit for that. Obviously, otherwise, he's a despicable person. Now, what led up to this, as best as I can tell, James Brenner was already a bad guy, and he was a squatter on Dylan's land, and there was some sort of disagreement about a gate, it being opened or it being closed, and allegedly That's what led to these two guys having this encounter in which James killed Dylan. I talked about this on the Unfound Live Show this previous Monday night, April 15th. And I said that could this be a situation where Dylan, only being 19, maybe didn't appreciate the danger? I made the argument, had he been 35 and maybe had more dealings with ornery people or a squatter here or there or something like that, or just people in general being in the business that he chose to be in, maybe he would have had a better idea that this could go really bad. It's just something that come to mind. He didn't appreciate, because of his lack of life experience, to know that this guy might be capable of anything. It sounded like they had some disagreements well before this. They did know each other, and we just don't know what the circumstances were. Even though James has admitted, I don't think publicly we know exactly what happened. Because I think somebody maybe with a little more life experience, if you did see James, for example, if you saw James coming down the road in his truck or whatever, knowing it was him, knowing this it was certainly an unusual situation, maybe Dylan could have been more prepared or something. It's just something that comes to mind. Either way, horrible. And, of course, James Brenner had a lot of charges against him even before this happened. And, of course, we can also maybe think if Dylan wasn't working alone, maybe this doesn't happen. But James Brenner is the cause of this. He murdered Dylan. And I'm happy that he led them to his remains. So there you go. Oh, and by the way, that was one that I got wrong. Just like I got the very recent, the disappearance of those two women who we now know were murdered by family members over child custody. Got that one wrong, but I also got Dylan Rounds' disappearance wrong. I was under the impression, if you go back and watch that Unfound Now episode, that I was under the impression it's very possible that this kid walked off out there alone. That is not what happened. I got it wrong. Next update, although it's not necessarily an update, it's just some insight that came to mind, and that was the disappearances and now deaths of Fang Jin and John Fitzpatrick. You remember Fang Jin was from China. She had somehow gotten to know John online. She came to the United States. He wanted to show her around California. They go missing. And a lot of people thought that did John lure her to the United States and kill her? And they were missing. And I have to admit, I'm not so sure that's what happened. Both of their remains ended up being found not too far away from each other as far as the way it's been explained. And so I have to admit, either one of two things, here's what I don't think happened. I don't think that John killed Fang. I don't think, of course he's dead too, I don't think this is some sort of murder-suicide situation. There's nothing that I've read to believe that yet. Very well could be that they ran into the wrong people and they were both murdered, but no cause of death. Nothing has been mentioned regarding Fang Jin's body. Was there a bullet hole in her head or something like that? I haven't read anything like that. Same way with John Fitzpatrick. But being, though, that they have described where the bodies were found, is it possible that these two got caught up in some sort of flash flood? Because both of them were found in a wash. Now, granted, I lived in Las Vegas, which is a high desert, and didn't rain there too often. But there are areas of the southwest United States where they do get rain, and it is desert, and what can look just like regular desert land becomes a river in seconds. As the water starts flowing downhill, it all goes, of course, it's rambling, raging toward the lowest spot. And so what you think is just a little valley, just a little bump in the terrain, is actually, when it rains, a place where water is going to run if it rains. Is this what happened? Where they camped out and a flash flood occurred, and that's what killed them. This is very common. I don't know how common it is in other countries because, of course, all countries have different terrains. And here in the United States, I mean, we have high deserts, we have mountains with snow on them, and we have the lowest point with Death Valley out there in California. And we have, of course, Florida, where the highest point is only like 300 feet above sea level, and on we have the Appalachian Mountains. We have a lot of different topography in the United States. This country is huge. So I don't know if this happens in other countries, these kinds of situations where people go out into the desert to go camping, and then it rains and they get flooded away. But it does happen here. So if you go out in the desert, I know it may be windier and everything, but if you're going to set up a tent, do not set up a tent in a valley, because you may be unwittingly putting yourself in what otherwise is a river, an area that will turn into a river with just the slightest amount of rain. The ground, because it's so dry, is so hard, the rain does not soak in to the ground. It just starts flowing. Just something to think about regarding their deaths. Finally, this is the last update for this episode. Caitlin Alice Massey White. And to remind all of you, this is a young woman from Ohio, although it seems like she might have been from West Virginia, or at least got married in West Virginia, but she was in Ohio, took off, and they were able to trace her to the Midwest, and they were able to show that she might have bought a train ticket or a plane ticket to go to L.A., and she seemingly left without anything. I actually got a message from somebody in her family saying that Caitlin has been found and she is okay, and I believe this message to be true. So unclear how that all happened. This person did not go into a lot of details or anything, but I believe the message that Caitlin is not missing and that she's not deceased. I don't need to know anything more than that. That she's back home, and if she needs it, it kind of did sound to me like maybe she needed some help mentally or something. Maybe not. That's just the way it seemed to me when I read about her disappearance. If she really does need that, I hope she's getting the help that she needs. Or if she did this for totally some other reason, I guess the family will have to deal with that too. All that matters is that Caitlin was found alive, and it doesn't sound to me like she's in any danger or anything like that, which is good news. If you could now pause whatever you are doing as I now read off all of the missing people featured on Unfound and Unfound Now. Suzanne Lyle, Jason Jolkowski, Jesse Foster, Rose Marie Gayhart, Ben Charles Padilla, Kelly Rothwell, Joshua Guimond, Donnie Smatlack, Andrea Bowman, Robin Abrams, Regina Marie Boss, Christopher Hyde, Jeff Nichols, Rebecca Gary, James Walker, Teresa Butler, Charlotte Paulus, Lola Catherine Fry, Eric Franks, Jeff Joseph, Donna Mikolenko, David Medot, Kent Monroe, and Omar Shearer, Claudia Wells, Peggy and Patty McDaniel, Shannon Turner, Brandy Wells, Cleshindra Hall, Ronnie Russell, Esther Westenbarger, Shane Fell, Ashley Eifert, Brandon Williams, Craig Freer, Pamela Golden, Chip Campbell, Amanda DeGuio, the passengers and crew of Flight 370, April Pitzer, Jennifer Wilkerson, Kent Jacobs, Aaron Gilbert, Tammy Leppert, Crystal Morrison, Chris Turner, Linda Carroll, Nikki McCown, Helen Diamond, Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, Lucinda Hues, Ashley Kohler, Debbie Lowe, Patrick Beavers, Clinton Nelson, Troy Galloway, Patty Action, Danielle Bell, Evelyn Hartley, Dow Phillips, Tyler Stice, Bill Underhill, Patricia Taylor, Aaron Barnard, Jeremy Burt, Brian Sullivan, Nikki Wells, Marina Bolter, Mandy Stokes, Greg Brooks, Rebecca Henderson, Dominic Holly Grisham, Tiffany Daniels, Nicholas Masucci, Donald Irwin, Billy DiSilvestro, Renee Yeargain, Mikkel Biggs, Al Copper, J.R. Mullahan, Jamie Bowen, Travis Robertson, Rosemary Rapp, Kristen Modafferi, Zoe Campos, Sean Ginyard, Thomas Brown, Amanda Fravel, Julie Early, Ellen Sloan, Renee Lamanna, Nico Lisi, Leah Peebles, Melissa Hasley, Kimberly Raymer, Stephen Kocher, Bonnie Joseph, Immaculate Basil, Bobby Campbell, Kimberly Norwood, Alyssa Turney, Bobby Tennyson, Dale Kerstetter, Lacey Buenfil, Peggy Maguire, Jansen Brewer and Daniel Braden, Robert Wayne Cox, Lucas Degerness, Stephen Adams, Ashley Summers, Bonnie Dagus and Jeremy Dagus, Judith Emke, Jessica Hamby, Tim Beauchart, Devin Bond, Juanita Nelson, Desiree Ferris, Angie Yarnell, Deborah Asbury, Sean Koski, Mary Lands, Devin Brown Busetta, Shanna Boydo, Travis Murrow, Keith Fetter, Layla Faulkner, Megan Lancaster, Kelly Sims, Jack Hemby, Barbara Frame, Dory Ann Myers, Austin Pivo, Christine Hamilton, Monica Appleton, Jonathan Estes, Molly Miller, and Colt Haynes, Donnie Martin III, Kamisha Hollis, Lisa Wallace, Tammy McKittrick, Julie Say, Stephanie Clemens, Andy Chapman, Trevor Nichols, Tiffany Joseph, Tyler North, David Kesey, Lucera Sarabia, Brandy Myers, J.L. Hamblin, Bradley Allen, Timothy Guy, Janelle Matthews, Ronald McNutt, Cameron Remmer, Tammy Arthur, and Chad Peters, Jesse Ross, Lisa Shuttleworth, Jackson Miller, Patrick Reed, Jeremy Goodwin, Mary Jane Van Gilder, Phyllis Corbin, Eric Alvarado, Cassandra Ramirez, April Andrews, David Hardy Jr., Dennis Lushbaugh, Christy Nichols, Chris Sanders, Danielle Sleeper, Julie Weflin, Shelva Rafty, Rodney Kaiser, Chris Mittendorf and Christina Branham, Gregory House, Brian Cook, Charles Thompson, Jessica Garino, Jacob Weeks, Jackie Bucky Letney, Joe Bain, Vanessa Oren, Jennifer Casper Ross, Robbie Hurt, Unique Harris, Doug Jones, Deborah Bowman, Bradley Brooks, Angela Green, Jody Husentrut, Brennan Smokey, Rouse Chapman, Marion Hurley, Gayla Shaper, Caleb Powell, Chelsea Cobo, Bonnie Santiago, TJ Murray, Noah Davis, Patty Dudek, Ben Archer, Jake Lachelet, Sky Burnley, Kayleen Oling, Stephanie Hartwell, Nylene Marshall, Kaya Taylor, Pearl Pinson, Brenda Condon, Alwyn Albright, Sky Tosick, Sandy Knipe, Brian Schaefer, Teresa Woolard, Toby Anderson, David Schrader, Chance Engelbert, Julianne Gillet, Rachel Sierks, Sean Antill, Randy Duran, Rashawn Francis, Amanda Ward Romine, Crystal Bailey, Brenda Sika, Laverta Sorrell, Nicholas Shin, Kevin Newen, Ashley Simpson, Leanne Hosberg, Alicia Markovich, Audrey Heron, Lonine Rogers, Beatrice Viela, Ali Lowitzer, Jamie Peterson, Belinda Blaniar, Jordan Carvalho, Christian Balky Thompson, Paul Sanders, Jennifer Perry, Andrea Knabel, Sebastian Kelly, Marianne Verdecchia, Marcella Krolsey, and Mary Regan, Sue Swedell, Mark Heimbaugh, Dub and Chance Wackerhagen, Kimberly Wilson Talley, Harry Milligan, Paul Egan, Steve Davis, Douglas Crawford, Rhonda Smith, Ryan Stuka, Daniel Villarreal, Mary Watkins, Bradley Strassner, Justin Gaines, Jacqueline Cooper, Holly White, Michaela Bally, Chase Lackey, Belinda Brewster, the Pickering Six, Jay Boyle, Michael Cummins, Danny Higgins, Chad Smith, Robbie Rumbolt, and Jamie Lafaber. Brenda Davidson, Milda McQuillan, Kyle Fleischman, Paris Hobson, Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, Jessica Stacks, Natasha and Susan Carter, Angela Freeman, Mark Allen, Mary Cox, Jamie Valdez, Jace Martin, Brandon Rashar, Keith Call and Sandra Haley, Evelyn Piper, Leslie Allen and children, Matthew Braswell, Brandon Roberts, Emily Richards, Bo Mann, Judith Devers Hyder, Barbara McCrae, Judy Brown and Richard Riesenberg, Jason Landry, Athel Turner, Treveline Evans, Alan Glasgow, Barbara Cotton, Tony Schwark, Sean Dickerson, Patricia Otto, David Wagoner, Maura Murray, Brian Vargo, Bianca Carrasco, Paige Renkoski, Betty Tepfer, Joel Akridge, Brenda Lambert, Aaliyah Boomer, Donnie Atkins, Brandon Barron, Jesse Farber, Christopher Dalfett, John Spira, Patsy Clark, Arlen Bynum, Irene Gaca, Kenny Weaver, Ashley Higgins, Camille Dardanes, Pauline Diaz, Jamie Lee, Lisa Green, Larry Goodman, Irma McCurcheon, Glenda Griffin, Nancy Garcia, Kim Moreau, Carl Pope, Elena Carisi, Sylvia Galvin, April Wiss, Ashley Linden, Jaden Carpenter, Ricky Bryant, Linda Stoltfus, Erica Lloyd, Mary Lane Carter, Stephanie Hollingsworth, Corey Dale Moore, Alan White, Jason Landry, Aaliyah Scheibel, Kirsten Brueggemann, Mark Pinella, Cynthia Baal Traore, Louis Davila, Candy Gonzalez, Justin Syweck, Michael Vaughn, Wendy Gessing, Shannon Miller, Glenda Parton, and Dwayne Selby, Heidi Plank, Stephen Salazar, Lindsay Shobalak, Jordan Simeon, Marie Peter Toltz, Dylan Rounds, Dana Smithers, Gregory Peterson, Caitlin Rose Case, Lorenzo Holmes Jr., Elizabeth Capaldi, Christopher Miller, John Tipton, Maya Blanton, Bao Fan, Shauna Helford, Andrew France, Kay Alana Turner, Andrew Griffin, Fang Jin and John Fitzpatrick, Reno Long, Chelsea Grimm, Caitlin Alice Massey White, Thomas Irwin, Tyler Goodrich. Please, if you have the time and passion, please contact these missing persons' families to help them in their quests to find their missing loved ones. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.